The incense in my Mauritanian court always smells of cedar and salt. Yet tonight, the air is heavy with a ghost I cannot banish. They call me Cleopatra Selene II, Queen of Mauritania, the daughter of the Nile. I had survived the chains of a Roman triumph and went on to wear a crown of my own. But they also speak of my mother in whispers of poison and scandal, painting her as a siren who traded kingdoms for kisses. The whore queen who had seduced Rome's greatest men for personal gain. I let them talk, though, because none of these sniveling men ever had the privilege to see the divine queen, Pharaoh of the two kingdoms, Upper and Lower Egypt, the physical manifestation of divine Isis herself, protector to all Egyptians and queen of the gods. That was the Cleopatra. The mother. Only I knew now. I remember the heat of Alexandria that day. Sticky, oppressive, and smelling of the palace gardens, the most splendid in all the world. And the coming storm. My mother stood by the tall arched window, her silhouette framed by a harbor that was no longer hers. She didn't look like a goddess then. It was for the first time I had noticed how small she really was. Despite that, though, she still had the trappings of her former position, dressed in silks of impossible colors, golden adornments, and jewels worth more than all of Rome. She smelled of the most expensive perfumes, and yet there was the sharp, metallic tang of stress that no perfume could mask. When she turned to me, her cajole was slightly smudged, a human imperfection that terrified me more than the Roman crimson-colored sails that sat on the horizon, like a great fire heading straight for us. I approached her, and she reached out quickly and grabbed a hold of me. She pulled me in close, pressing me into her chest tight, like she was trying to merge me with her very being. I noticed her fingers trembling as she ran them through my hair, like she had when she would tell us nighttime stories. I inhaled her perfume, warm, with notes of cinnamon, pine, and myrrh. It would be the last time I ever smelled home, that I felt truly safe. When she eventually broke away, it was slowly. Those intense, deep eyes of hers bore into my own with a desperate, fractured clarity. "Celine," she whispered, her voice like dry silk. "The world will try to tell you who you are based on who I was. Let them. Their words are just wind over the desert. But remember this. A queen's real throne isn't in a palace. It's in the silence of her own mind, where no man can reach her. Keep a part of yourself hidden, my little moon. Keep a garden where they cannot tread." She squeezed my shoulders, her grip almost painful, as if she were trying to anchor me to the earth before the tide swept her away. She knew. She knew Octavian's mercy, if he decided on it, would be little more than a gilded cage, and she knew she wouldn't be there to help me pick the lock. For a fleeting second, the Queen of Kings vanished. Her lip quivered, and I saw the jagged edge of her grief. The heartbreak of a mother realizing she was leaving her children to be raised by her executioners. She kissed my forehead, her skin burning with a feverish intensity. "Go now," she said, her voice cracking as she pushed me towards the guards. "Don't look back. Look only to the sun, and promise me you will find a way to shine, even when it sets." I did as she asked. I found my sun. But tonight, as the Mediterranean moon rises over my own kingdom, I realize her vague advice was the only map I ever needed. The transition from the warmth of her arms to the cold stone of the palace corridors was instantaneous. The guards did not handle me roughly, not yet. But there was a new, clinical edge to their movements. I was no longer a princess of the realm. I was a curated asset of the Roman state. As I was led away, the sounds of Alexandria changed. The rhythmic chanting of the priests and the bustling of the markets were replaced by the rhythmic clatter of caligae, Roman sandals. The iron-shod boots of Octavian's vanguard were striking the marble of my ancestors, a sound like a hammer nailing a coffin shut. I didn't look back. I clung to the scent of that beautiful perfume on my skin, terrified that a single breeze would strip it away and leave me with nothing of her, and all that would be left was the smell of Roman iron and sweat. They brought me to the lower atrium. There, standing amidst the statues of Ptolemies who had once ruled the world, was Octavian. He didn't look like the monster the rumors had suggested. He looked like a man made of marble and calculation, his eyes the color of a winter sea. He turned his attention away and looked at me, at my brothers, Alexander and Ptolemy, standing shivering beside me, not with hatred, but with the terrifying neutrality of a collector assessing his new set of coins.
Your mother is a woman of great complexities.
He said, shattering the awkward silence with all the grace of a hammer to glass. His gaze shifted for a moment, lingering on the door I had just exited.
It is a pity she chooses the shadows over the light of Rome.
I felt white-hot rage boil deep in my body. It took everything to contain the urge to scream, to shout at him that he knew nothing of her, that he hadn't seen her hand shake or heard the cracks in her voice. He hadn't seen her sacrifices all these years. He hadn't seen how far she had always gone for all of her people, and how they loved her for it. Where had he been during Actium? My mother had been right there beside my father, while he stayed behind in that cesspit Rome while the brute Agrippa did all the work he was taking credit for. He was a liar and a snake, and it was he who worked in the shadows of those more talented and greater than himself. But then I found it. The hidden garden she had told me to keep. I retreated into that silence as she had commanded. I gathered myself and took a deep breath as I smoothed down my tunic. Then I lifted my chin and looked him directly in the eye with a gaze I had inherited directly from her. And for a moment, I think I saw a sliver of annoyance in them. A flash of anger, perhaps, as he realized despite everything my mother would survive in future generations. And I couldn't help but feel a slight smile cross my lips, knowing I had gotten under his skin. He could take my home, my brothers, and even my name, but he would never take the part of me that belonged to the Nile, or the piece of my mother that resided in me, the last pharaoh of Egypt. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Brandon. And welcome to the Time Travelers Club season finale. Well, it's finally here, guys. We've come to the end of the story, and we're having a lot of mixed feelings about this. I mean, I was just talking to you last time we talked, and like it just feels really kind of surreal. We've been
It
doing this.
is.
Yeah. I feel like if you had asked me when we first started this, like, hey, are you cool with this being like 6 months like uh,
That was not what we initially planned, but we had to. It was, fortunately or unfortunately, it was kind of required, because this is not a story that can be condensed while keeping the richness of it.
yeah, because there have been a couple times I had thought about it. I had thought about like, okay, maybe Brandon, you're going down your ADHD, rabbit holes too much. And the more I looked at it, I'm like, no, I think honestly, I am still covering bare bones of someone's entire life, right?
Hmm.
Um, and no, I don't think I think I want to just keep doing that. Um, and I think it's important to do these deep dives because as you and I have both discovered, right, like there's a lot in the narrative that the traditional story that's told to you in your high school class, maybe for a half hour, it's crazy. I guess you can't condense someone's life into a half hour, right?
Amazing.
And
What a
and
concept.
that by taking those details away, you're losing a lot of the story and like really how you can interpret it, and as we're starting to see, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so I don't regret it, but damn. So, but we're here.
We're here now.
And of course, this is the most famous and dramatic chapter to our story on these most infamous of lovers. With that being said, we have decided that perhaps due to it being the main topic of this episode, we should give a disclaimer now. Today, we will be discussing in detail about suicide and self harm. With that being said, if this is a rough subject for you or you're just not in the mood for such a downer topic, we totally get it. But this is perhaps unfortunately what both of our main characters are rather famous for. And there is also a ton of misinformation that has come down to us as legend. So we think it's important to try and set the record straight as we have this whole time, right? And
Hmm.
put things in its proper historical context. Besides that, we have really come to get to know these characters over the last few months, and I think it's only right we give them the level of scrutiny and detail that we have all come to expect. So, with that out of the way, on with the show. Last time we left our courageous commander on the walls of Alexandria, watching his forces melting away en masse to the side of Octavian. But before we get to the end, let's talk about what happened between Axiom and this momentous defeat. After all, that's a long time. A year. A year went by,
Yep.
almost to the day. Which is honestly, I think I thought about that. Maybe that's why the narrative has kind of come down to us this way. I don't know about you, but like the way it's always kind of been told to me, it was like they lose the Battle of Actium, they flee back to Egypt, and then Octavian follows suit, and they kill themselves, right?
Yeah, and it's always
And
been condensed as like this very
right,
tiny, very neat, put it into a box type of story.
yeah, and I my only thought on that is because what we said the Battle of Actium happened at the end of August, early September, right?
Hmm.
And this takes place at the beginning of September of
I
a
wonder if
year
people
later.
didn't pay attention to the dates.
Yeah, right. But like, there's a whole lot that goes on in between a year, which makes sense. If it had only been a couple days, okay, maybe we get it. But no, like, that's not really quite what happened. And honestly, truth is way more interesting than that narrative, right? So, um, and like we were kind of pointing at last time too, maybe this notion comes from the benefit of hindsight and Octavian propaganda,
Indeed.
right? And we're going to get into that. While the situation was getting more and more desperate, it really wasn't until that moment on the walls of Alexandria that anyone realized it was over, right? They fought until that point.
Yes.
So, following their defeat in the Battle of Actium at the, oh God, here we go again, Ambracian Gulf of Greece in 31 BCE, a year earlier, Cleopatra and Antony had retreated to Egypt to recuperate and prepare for an assault by Octavian, whose forces grew larger with the surrender of many of Antony's officers and soldiers left behind in Greece.
All right. So those first few days after the Battle of Actium had been tense to say the least. For at least 3 days afterwards, Antony and Cleopatra apparently weren't speaking, and it took the combined efforts of two of Cleo's most trusted servants, Iras, her hairdresser, and Charmin, not the toilet paper, her advisor, and lady in waiting, to even get them to eat and sleep in the same room.
See, the hairdressers were coming for them.
Apparently. Damn those hairdressers.
Watch out.
But they continued from Greece and made their way to Egypt, making landfall not in Alexandria, but at a desolate outpost at the northwestern tip of the country. From here, they separated, with Antony rushing to Libya while Cleopatra went back to her capital to try and do damage control. If she was quick enough, she might beat the news of what happened and put her own version of events to the public first. But she knew better than anyone that pageantry was really going to sell it, so she ordered last-minute arrangements to make her grand entrance to Alexandria's port as grand as any triumph. But eventually the people came to understand what had actually happened. And as we have seen before, you do not want to mess with a poor Alexandrian approval rating.
Well, it is a poor, like, you know, like a poor approval rating. Like, because girl, see, if our current Lord and Protector of the United States had his current approval rating with an Alexandrian, forget it.
He would have been dead
Like,
already.
torn from limb.
Yeah.
Ooh, as we've seen a many a time at the very beginning of this series.
Indeed. Yeah, it's just
Alexandrians know how to party hardy. They know how to throw a good riot.
They know how to party. But she began to fear their reprisal for this spectacular failure. And in a desperate move to retain control, she began an unbridled killing spree.
Ooh.
Anyone who was her detractor was arrested and swiftly executed. Then, just to make it worse, she would use their seized properties and confiscate great sums to refill her coffers.
Oh, so do I dare say this might be ice, sis? Yeah.
Whew.
Oh,
why? The thing is, like, it's always been the other side that has been behaving badly, and then all of a sudden she is.
Well, I think this is going to speak to her desperation now at this point, right? She's having to resort to old tactics. Not her old tactics, right? She had been new.
Yeah.
She had handled people with respect and, God forbid, gave them due process and things like that. I mean, not that she didn't have campaigns and stuff where maybe she subtly got rid of people or whatever, but this is like stuff her dad had done, stuff that her forefathers had done, things Rome was always doing. Like, but she had been honestly kind of different.
She had been
And as
different, and
we
now
saw,
she was showing that she was in fact cut from the same cloth under
if
all of
need
it.
be,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's just, I don't know if that's like an upbringing thing. That's not necessarily, I think it's just, does this prove maybe when people get desperate, right?
Yeah.
Like that sometimes they'll resort to that because it's like, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
Indeed.
But yeah.
But she even went so far as to seize treasure from the very temples that had once been the very basis for her rise to popularity. Now, even these weren't safe in her desperation to find footing.
Yeah, that's the big one. That's the big
Oh.
one. Like she had done a lot to ingratiate herself with all these different temples and the people, right? Because the temples were the connector between her and the people, right? The temples
Yes.
for a long time had been the administration, like almost like a shadow government, sort of. Not like that makes it sound like they were pulling strings, and they weren't per se, but like the
No, but
Ptolemies
that's
could not be bothered with proper administration. It's like, yeah, you guys know the people, you take care of it. Also, just make sure that the tax money comes to us.
yeah.
But he had actually gone a step further and been like, I don't expect you to give me money for nothing.
No, and temples were a lot different because they were also like a basis of life. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just for worship. It was for many
Mm-hmm.
different aspects of life.
Well, it was kind of like your county, like for us in the United States, I can't, I guess, speak to every, whatever. They were kind of like your town hall in some countries, but like for us, it would be the equivalent of like, I don't know, like the county building, for us, right?
Yeah.
So if we go to the county building, like that's where we do like records, DMV, sometimes the town hall too, but like social services, anything like that, food stamps, anything like that, right? So like if you had people who needed food, they'd come to the temple. If you had like medicine, I need to like, see a doctor, cool. You would go to the temple. I have a death record I have to put in, birth records,
Yeah.
marriage licenses, all of that goes through the temple, right? And there's of course, just
Mhm.
like here, taxes that go along with that, little like, yep, you just got to put down like, your fee for that. And they collect all that money.
Yeah.
And then some of that has to be sent back too, right? Also, that's usually where like taxes were deposited, like like the safest part of usually these areas, right,
Mhm.
would be the temple, the most
Yes.
secure areas, right?
Indeed.
Um,
So, yeah, it just
so
the fact that she was turning on the temples and draining them, that's
well, because
concernicus.
unlike Greece, Rome, like honestly, most of the Near East and stuff where they have like vast acropolises and forts that you would keep that money in. Egypt, think about where it is geographically. Your local town's probably not getting invaded.
True.
So like she honestly, it's kind of taking advantage of it because like the temple's probably not going to have like an army there or
Yeah.
guards like that, so like there's nothing stopping you, and especially if you're the ruler, right, to just
Mhm.
go up in there.
Exactly. But she also tried desperately to re outfit all new troops, look for any remaining allies that could help. From all records, though, she had lost her previous ability for statecraft. She was a loose cannon, desperate and thrashing violently. The king of Armenia, who was her prisoner for 3 years, met a very sudden end. His head was sent to his Median rival some 1,200 miles away. Was it a threat? Was it an unasked for favor? We think that, she could have perhaps found a more suitable gift basket. Um, uh, didn't she learn from her brother how ineffective this tactic was?
Yeah,
Caesar?
right. Like last time I checked, when they sent Pompey's head to Caesar, it was not
Yeah.
received well.
No, it was
But
not.
also like God, there's so much. Like, what was it? Well, like they're 1,200 miles away. God, that head could not have been in good condition by the time it showed up.
No,
Oh,
absolutely not. Disgusting.
could you imagine just like, oh, hey, the Queen of Egypt sent something to you in the mail. Oh, I wonder what it is. I'm excited.
It's
Oh
a
my God. What is
it's a
this?
rotting head.
It's just like, why would she send this? Who? What? It's
Ugh.
who? It's who? How would I know that? Why couldn't she
Unless
just send some cinnamon or something? God.
something.
Ah, who
I
wants this?
know.
It's just,
But when Antony himself returned from Libya, he saw his love consumed by this manic state. She even went so far as to try and retrieve her remaining ships from the Gulf of Suez, and to have them hauled some 40 miles overland so they might be relaunched in the Red Sea. She had a wild plan of making a new home for herself beyond the borders of Egypt, possibly as far as India. But those rival kings she had frustrated for all these years finally came back to bite her. The Nabateans caught wind and abused the ships, setting them ablaze. Herod, meanwhile, finally played his hand. With their combined forces, Octavian would have never stood a chance. But rather than help Cleopatra, Herod decided to assist her enemy instead. He had had enough of her and Antony and decided to take his chances. He claimed it was only because the Nabateans had made their intentions against Cleopatra known and that he had betrayed Antony. But Herod always had been a shrewd player. He even joined Octavian's pleas to just abandon the Egyptian queen and they would welcome him back. By this point, she even tried to stir up trouble in Spain, as it hadn't been fully conquered by Rome yet. Maybe considering even ruling from there and found a new kingdom. It was far-fetched and clearly the plans of someone in a state of pure panic.
yeah, because I feel like that's a stretch, right? If
Yeah.
Hannibal couldn't do it, right? Hannibal. I just don't know. We said she's not a military queen. Okay. Um just yeah. It's it's kind of I think we've gotten to the point where like she's like, okay, Egypt might be untenable right now,
Yeah.
but like and like these sound like wild and crazy ideas, right? But like her think about like honestly, this goes back to her very roots. What happened with her dad? They got the fuck out of Dodge
Mm-hmm.
and ran to Rome. And then like, he was reinstated. She was able, that was where her comeback came. So it's not that crazy, and like in ancient history, you do see this a lot where like a king or a queen might flee, right? And then come back.
Yeah. It has precedent.
Yeah, like you couch surf at your, you know, look your buddy's couch and just, hang tight until you can come back. But I think Spain was a stretch.
Very much so, because she would have to get on the other side of Rome. How the hell was she going to do that?
Oh yeah, you have to cross the Mediterranean and all that, and
Uh-huh.
you're not really safe there. There's Romans there,
Exactly.
and like you aren't gonna have the benefit of your kingdom to fund you and all that shit.
Nope.
Um,
It gets her further away from her source of wealth and her source of power.
at
And it's
least
just
India would have made sense, right?
yeah.
Because India is outside of the reach of Rome.
Yes.
You could be alone. It would suck, but you could be alone and still possibly even make a comeback, right? Because you just have to convince the people there to back you up, and then maybe you come back with like the resources to do that because you have the time to recuperate without the threat of like someone to come and get you.
Yes.
You ain't gonna get that in Spain. And so I don't know. I think that was just we're starting to get a little desperate. Meanwhile, Antony was depressive to her manic. He had been lost for a while, and I mean, maybe literally, he was probably drunk. He always kind of had an alcohol problem,
A little
and
bit, just a little bit.
as we're about to see, I'm sure this didn't get better. But we mean more metaphorically. And he roamed around North Africa with literally two of his buddies and a Rhetorian. That's it.
The thing is, I don't know if that would be like the best support when you're in a state of depression.
It's more that it's really dangerous.
Yeah.
You're essentially a wanted man, and yes, you're within the bounds of your own country, I guess, but like, not really his country, right? And like, if an Egyptian kind of looked at him sideways, maybe they turn him in.
Scary.
Yeah, and you have no guard. Like, I think that when I worked, there was like a guard,
Ooh.
but all of them agree that was like he had two buddies and this one random rhetoric guy, and that was it. Which I'm like, so he's not a buddy. Because otherwise they would just say
No.
three of his buddies. But I don't know what's going on there. But like, anyway, the point was that, yeah.
Well, you know what? A Rhetorian, somebody that he could bounce, speeches off of, potentially.
Yeah.
So, like, trying to claim a comeback, trying to get space to think, trying to, possibly get some kind of a speech under his feet that he would be able to kind of rectify this verbally.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I was thinking, maybe just now, this would make more sense if he had maybe a small contingent of guard, like 5 or 6 guys, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, maybe he's just trying to get in and out, right? Like really get, because, you don't want a big group if you're trying to like sneak into a city, get into like, the main halls of power and convince people to help you, right? But like,
Yeah.
you would still want a bodyguard of some kind, right? Because if you're caught on the street, you need some goons essentially to help you out, to get you
Indeed.
out of that tight spot. It's so like, even for covert operations, like to have just 2 of your buddies,
Concernicus.
not great. Yeah. But with that being, so I don't know. But with that being said, when he arrived to Cyrene, he discovered 4 of his legions there had already defected.
What the fuck?
So apparently here, he had his first recorded suicide attempt.
Oh.
Yeah. So the story gets painted a lot, right? It's the final tale, right? That Mark Antony, of course, kills himself, but then they go into Cleopatra and like really go into detail about how she did it, right? And I almost feel like there's this connotation that she was almost like more suicidal than he was, right? But I think it's just because, again, how you're telling the story, because you're really kind of just glossing it over with him. And that he only died out of desperation or something. But this is why it's so important to talk about this in between. Because did you hear how I just said first?
Indeed.
She is manic. She is coming off as, all right, how the fuck do I get out of this? I see her with like a whiteboard. You know that meme with the guy with the whiteboard and all the strings and shit? And he's like, see? Like, that's her.
It's all connected. Yes.
And he's just like, this is why I'm like, red flag. He only left with like 2 guys.
Yeah. Because it wouldn't take that many to bring his body back.
Right. Or even like, I'm exposing myself and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Almost like asking for it. That way he could die in a fight.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that one. But anyway, it was only the intervention of his friends that he had brought with him that stopped this, though. Right.
Yeah.
And they quote unquote delivered him back to Alexandria. Right. It doesn't sound like they convinced him.
No,
So much as
if you're
maybe
having to deliver somebody,
yeah,
that's different.
and they brought him back to Alexandria. Like, okay, he needs help.
Yeah.
So, and it's so as we are seeing, his mental state is beginning to degrade by this point, right?
Yeah.
And here in Alexandria, he was a shadow of himself. And these are all, like, I think things we can agree are going to be red flags if we knew someone, right? Or have had someone. I've had people where this has been a thing, you know?
Yeah.
So he was no longer the jolly, party-loving jock with the winning attitude. He began to retreat. So he's starting to have these big personality changes.
Mm-hmm.
Red flag. He withdraws from society, then his friends, and eventually his family.
Red flag.
Red flag. He would move out and set up far removed from it all, at a hut near the Great Lighthouse.
Oh,
Red flag. Yeah, and like so, and specifically this lighthouse, it's not like it's in the middle of town. Like, I mean, I guess you kind of think it is based off a map, but really, it's off just like kind of like loop-de-loop like horn. And so it's only connected by this itty bitty land bridge, right? And the only people allowed near the lighthouse, right, are like guards and like specific staff. Like people can't just rock up in there. And he's living on a hut on this like rock, right,
Yeah.
near the sea. Watching this horizon is like what I'm assuming he's just waiting for them to come. Just waiting. Yeah.
Indeed.
But I guess it wouldn't last too long. Cleopatra was able to coax him back. But that was perhaps the only victory she could claim at all. But that was perhaps the only victory she could claim in that moment. All of the bad news that we had just been talking about with Herod, the Nabateans, all that, right? Started pouring in now, including how the legions that had been left behind had all defected to Octavian. Because, spoiler alert, they didn't know that had happened yet. Also, the Roman governor of Syria was now full Team Octo by this point. Which I guess is not like a huge surprise from what I can gather. Maybe there was something I just missed. Like maybe he wasn't friends with Octavian or something, but like it's not looking good, right? It's not looking good. In theory, that was Octavian's territory though, right?
Yeah.
Or not Octavian, Antony's territory.
Yeah.
Syria was his home base. So now essentially Antony is a ruler of nothing. He has no power base to pull from anymore. He's out.
Yeah.
So that would be my thought. But yet, despite it all, or maybe because of it, they staged an elaborate coming of age party for their sons. Now, here on the Time Travelers Club, right? There's two things we love with kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what they are, Courtney?
Oh.
Child marriages, right?
Oh.
Which, hey, you're in luck. It's not what this is this time, okay?
Thank God.
But we do need, but these kids, I mean, what the fuck are they doing? They're 15, 16 years old. Get a job.
Yeah.
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 So it wasn't just their quinceañera. It wasn't their bat mitzvah. Because now you need a job, bitch. Get to work. So, as you do, Antylus, who was now 15, that's Antony's son with Fulvia, and Caesarion, who was 16. They're men now. Men.
Oh.
And as birthday presents, they got to be enlisted in the military. Hooray!
Oh.
They get to be military commanders. Hooray! And I'm sure the troops were super happy with that.
No.
Maybe Caesarion. Okay, so here's my thought. Maybe Caesarion.
Yes, maybe Caesarion.
Because he had been working. Yeah, he's been having a 16-year political campaign that he didn't even arrange. His mom was doing that for him. But
yeah,
Antylus, I don't know.
And not so much.
And speaking of Antylus, he was involved in one of 3 unsuccessful embassies to Octavian. I'm not saying it's his fault that it was unsuccessful. I'm just saying it probably didn't help, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that they were not successful embassies that were sent over. So Antony sent him over to Octavian with a large sum of money in exchange for peace that time. Octavian, true to form, because you're going to learn that Octavian's kind of a greedy fuck, right? Octavian kept the money, but dismissed Antylus and returned him to his father.
Oh.
It won't be the last time you hear that. So, speaking of Octavian, because it's been a while, our favorite twerp. Throughout this time, of course, he threatened Cleopatra publicly, right?
Yep.
But it would seem privately, it was an entirely different matter. According to Dio, which grain of salt with any of these guys, but Cleopatra, seeing the writing on the wall, sent Octavian a golden scepter, crown, and throne, right? So she sends him this letter.
Mm-hmm.
She sees what's happening, and she's like, okay, maybe I can like postpone this. We can like, work something out, right? Or maybe I could do kind of like what my dad did and like abdicate something, right?
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, I'll abdicate in exchange for clemency, right? Which was not too unusual for Ptolemy, as we've said.
True.
And if these escape plans are true, maybe she was thinking, okay, I'm pulling directly from that playbook of my dad. Because that's kind of what he did, sort of, except it's his own family that kind of uprose and took over. But still, it's like, okay, if I can leave Caesarion, for example, in charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of use him as a puppet king, that would really, really suck. But I could piece off to India and come back and save him, right? Or whatever.
Yes.
But she really loved her baby boy, so I don't know if she would do that to him so much as have maybe someone else set up as like a puppet person, right? But
indeed.
Antony was also sending letters though at this time, right? And he was asking to be allowed to become a private citizen, kind of like Lepidus had done in Egypt, right? Or even Athens, if that was too much to ask for. Like, he's like, yo, I get if you don't want me to stay in Egypt because messy. But like, I'll even stay in Athens, right? Like, I'll just be a normal guy, rich, normal guy, but normal guy, right? Like, I'll be with Octavia, kissy, mwah.
Yeah.
Well, Octavian left Antony unread. He's just like, no. Didn't even look at it. But he did respond to Cleo, surprisingly, right? He replied back to her, he would be perfectly reasonable with her. That's a quote. Ugh. But with one condition. Because of course there was. It's Octavian. Of course there was. Here's the condition.
Oh dear.
He wanted her to personally arrange for Antony's execution. Or at least exile him so that Octavian could arrange it himself. Either way, it's essentially you kill him. You either kill him yourself or you set him up knowing he's going to get killed.
That's
he didn't agree to it, clearly. So because he's a rat bastard, he was also going to keep all the fabulous cash gifts and prizes.
Of course.
And then, meanwhile, Antony tried to reach out to Octavian again. This time, he delivered one of the remaining assassins of Caesar's, who had been living with Antony up until this point. And he sent that to Octavian, right? With a proposal. Here's our second, perhaps, suicide attempt. Okay? This is personally someone who's not well. He offered to end his own life if Octavian would spare Cleopatra.
Oof. That's
Now,
right.
the sources, I'm sure, are trying to paint this as like, oh, look, he's pussy whipped. I can believe this, though. Like if he really does care, right? Believes
Yeah.
it's his fault. Wouldn't you? It's his kids, too. And like that's his duty as a Roman man. Roman men, as we've seen, this is not uncommon, right? To
Correct.
take your own life for the sake of honor or sparing other people or whatever. I would personally argue it's almost selfish. And I'm not saying, this is really tricky territory. And I know they're not coming from this from a logical place, right? But like, you kind of have to know how women are treated in this
Yeah.
time. And like, when these Roman men would do that, like you're leaving the women who have no rights and children to the mercy of these people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I trust Romans enough because Roman men ain't shit to this honor system. Just saying.
You
Um,
ain't wrong.
but this is honestly really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He's not in a good mental state. He's not. Um, and of course, Octavian responded with silence and then proceeded to execute that assassin that was sent to him.
Dear God.
Octavian is brutal AF.
Octavian is just. Here's the thing. They keep proving over and over that Octavian has all the cards,
Uh
that
huh.
he has all of the power here. And
And
because of that, he's just like, okay, I don't have
and
to play ball.
and the other thing is though, does he? And that's the thing is we have to remember a lot of this is propaganda. They might be
Absolutely.
intentionally portraying him this like well, at least at first, like this way. But like I do believe that there's some truth to it, right? And he was a political animal. Like
Oh,
we thought
absolutely.
Cleo was good. Cleo had a conscience. Like he can't be as good as someone without a conscience. And he's like God, like he like left and right. We see like, and that's not what Roman people did, but Octavian did, and people celebrated it.
Yeah.
And like it's not in the purview of this season. Maybe it will be one day, but if we ever talk about Augustus, aka Octavian 2.0, like when he rebrands himself, he kind of portrays him as like it sometimes portrays, well, Octavian young, he was young, and then when he became emperor, Augustus, he mellowed out. His
No.
daughter was sent to Starvation Island when she wouldn't abide to the crazy marital, like women suppressing sex laws. So like, yeah. It's on I think he got better because he was able to spin the propaganda because he was the state.
Yes.
I am the Senate.
I am the Senate. Yep, exactly.
Right. He became Palpatine, so he didn't have to pretend to be Chancellor anymore. So
Uh,
right. So then he could paint himself a certain way.
it
Um,
hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It
it
hurts.
was, and it's like yes, it was Pax Romana, but through a state that suppressed you and got rid of anything the moment it popped up.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, here's a new road for you since you guys have been so good. But that is a long digression, and we have a lot to get through today. So, like I said, that's a story for a different day. Just know that at this point, he's brutal AF, and Ansei's not in a good place
No.
mentally, right? So counting it now, second possible attempt or wish to commit, end his life, commit to self harm.
Yep.
But here's the thing. The reality of the situation was that Ansei really had nothing to offer Octavian, right?
Hmm.
Hence, maybe why we're suicidal. Um, Unlike Cleopatra, who maybe this is not why she's not suicidal. She was just too fucking rich, right? And Octavian couldn't ignore that because he desperately needed that wealth for himself one way or another. Because we'll get into it. things actually weren't going that great back at home for him either, for a minute. So, and all, but with all this, we really have to question what was Octavian's end game here. Of course, like we said, Cleopatra, we know the story, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Antony can't be there at the end if she had done turned him over. So, of course, Cleopatra did none of those things that he asked for, but did he really expect her to? That's the question.
Probably not,
After all,
because mental torture, realistically, that was likely a test to see, okay, how dedicated are you?
well, and that's the thing. It's like, I think it's not even like whether, I don't think he expected one way or another. I think he played it in a way, because he's a political animal, that no matter what, he wins.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's proving it. So, like, after going through all this ceremony and grand theatrics of declaring war on this ratchet queen, would he have ever been able to truly pardon her or let her live? You go back to the Roman people. Actually, guys, turns out she's fine. She's cool. We like her now.
Yeah, that wouldn't go over very well.
Grant, we've seen our own political leaders. We've seen our own political leaders do that kind of stuff.
You're not wrong.
Epstein.
Oh God.
Like, turns out they're great.
Something about an island.
Yeah, we need to release that list. Just kidding. It's a hoax. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Right. So maybe people would believe it. I don't know. But did he truly believe she was a political animal like him? You know, like, maybe because if he's a sociopath, maybe he doesn't understand that. Maybe he's like, oh, well, that's what I would do.
Pretty much.
Maybe. Where did he, or did he know that this was something that she was always going to say no to, like you were saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's honestly hard to say, and there's arguments for all of it.
Well, there is arguments for all of it, and the thing is, you can throw it out there as much as you want to, but realistically, him throwing it out there, whether he thought that she was going to do it or not, both of them create the same kind of anguish.
Yeah.
So either way, it's painful.
Yeah, either way, she keeps him, doesn't comply, continues the reason for the war, or she does comply, and it proves everything he said about her was true.
Exactly.
And we would ignore the context that she was trying to keep her kids alive, her people safe, whatever it was.
Exactly.
Either she's a selfish bitch because she chose him over her country, or she's a lying, backstabbing whore who threw out the man who dedicated his life to her. I'm sure he was keeping those suicide notes, by the way, and Antony letters as receipts for this situation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Either way. Also, maybe she had emails. I don't know. Let's see those emails, Cleo.
Let's see those emails, Cleo. It is also during this time that it is said Cleopatra was researching more into toxins that could suddenly and painlessly overwhelm senses, where the victim would appear to be in a profound natural sleep. In fact, it would seem that she was consulting directly with her personal physician, Olympus, who was at her side for weeks. All of this was going on, and they were still having their parties, but the undertones of those parties had changed. It was during this time that the Club of Inimitable Livers came under a new name. The Companions to the Death.
Ugh.
And during this time, Cleopatra oversaw the hurried construction of an elaborate 2-story building adjacent to an Isis temple with the commanding view of the Mediterranean. And this would be her final resting place. Her mausoleum. But don't think it was all fun and games for Octavian. He was having some problems of his own. That winter.
Don't sound too excited about that. You were like, wait, the good news.
Good news, everyone. He's suffering.
Yay!
Yay! No, I fucking hate this guy. But like,
He's pretty irredeemable.
um but that winter, he returned quickly to Rome, where there were all sorts of demonstrations and disturbances. He was dealing with thousands of mutinous veterans. But eventually he would get it under control, and that spring, he quickly made a trip east. Sailing had not even quite opened yet, but he moved quickly nonetheless. He had made the trip to Syria to meet his new friend, the governor, and no sooner that his men had made land on the Phoenician coast, that Herod was also there with all these gifts and provisions.
Which Herod is such a rat bastard here too, because like I didn't get into it because it's its whole thing, and I'm like, whatever, it's fine. But like there's a point he even goes through because he's very good at the pageantry too. Game recognizes game, that's why he doesn't like Cleo. But like he brings his crown, he's not wearing it, and he lays it at the feet of Octavian, who picks it up and places it upon his head, and bleh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So yeah.
For Cleopatra and Antony, their interests started to diverge by this point. The great general could, at this point, only hope for a brilliant last stand. Meanwhile, she still had to worry about the preservation of a dynasty, if not the whole country. She knew she couldn't hold out against Octavian and the military at this point, not without allies. Scholars like Dio and Plutarch would say that the following actions she took were cowardly and were proof of her vanity. But she was fighting for her life here as well as her throne and those of her children. She had ruled for 2 decades without illusions, and she knew that Octavian would never be deeply enamored with her, but for her wealth. So into the mausoleum, she kept gems, jewelry, works of art, golden royal robes, stores of spices, cinnamon, frankincense, and all the luxuries of the world. And with those riches was a vast quantity of kindling. It was a threat. If she were to just disappear, the treasure of Egypt would disappear with her. And this was a thought that tortured Octavian like no other.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say this proves right at the end. It is desperate, definitely giving a vibe, not a great vibe, but you can recognize she's still kind of a political animal here. She's like, all right, despite what all like Plutarch and Dio said, where she's like, yeah, she was just a whore trying to like shack up with him. No, but I do think she recognized like he wants my money. He could give a shit about me, right? I'm not going to be able to, even if that was the goal, I'm sure she would have been like, there's no way in hell, because he's like an asexual freak who's just a sociopath who's only interested in money.
Indeed.
And he don't need me for the money. If he just, that's why he's doing what he's doing. So she's like, all right, cool. And she hoards it all. And she's got the equivalent of fucking dynamite.
Yep. She's like, all right.
Come get me, bitch.
Your move, bastard.
But it's also still desperate because it's like, okay, but like, what's the long-term goal here? Like
there is no long-term goal. She can't have long-term goals because everything has to be in the short term. Realistically, when you're in these kinds of situations, we can't plan like a 5-year scoping. We have to plan move by move. This is like down to the last few players on a board for chess.
Yeah.
Everything like, it's like, has to be micro-examined.
And I think, is it like, all right, is she also now in this mental health state, right? Where she's absolutely. Like, okay, well, and this is my thought, right? Because there's almost like 2 thoughts I have right here. Either A, she's suicidal too at this point, maybe, which I'm not entirely convinced. I'll get there in a minute. Where it's like, okay, I know I'm going to die, so I'm going to just take all this with me. And I'm just waiting for him to show up. Or I keep all the wealth here, right? And I have something to negotiate with, where almost kind of like a bank robbery kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'll give you the money and you let me walk away. And then there's like two like people, and like, you know what I'm saying, like one of those where after she's gone from a certain distance, they'll have access to it. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, you know what I'm saying? Um,
And it's probably one of the only cards that she could really realistically play, because this man doesn't want to play ball. He just wants her
no.
possessions. He
And
wants
all
her
this like
power. He
experience,
wants her kingdom.
right? And like if like all she was in with these Roman guys for was the experience, you know, like none of that's helping her here.
No.
He's not like anything she's dealt with. He's not Pompey. He's not Caesar. He's not like Cassius or Brutus or Antony. Like he does not play ball, like you were saying. So,
He does not know ball.
oh, he knows the ball. He just like he's like, oh, this is kickball. Picks up the ball and smashes it against your face. Like,
Yeah.
well, I win since you can't get up. But that's not the rules. You didn't win. Don't matter. Are you getting up? Looks like I won.
Oh god.
Um.
Oh no, he was an only child.
Mhm.
Oh.
So after a long period of these failed negotiations, because they're still trying right up until the last minute, like sending him people, like please, 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 right?
Mhm.
You don't care. After he invades Egypt in 30 BCE, and Octavian captured Pelusium, which you know, here we are, back to the beginning of the story.
Full circle.
Circle. Cleopatra was on the other side of this last time.
Mhm.
It was her there with Ptolemy inside. And now she's inside with Octavian outside.
Mhm.
So, and then he sent his officer, a guy named Cornelius Gallus, um, to march from Cyrene and capture Peritonian to the west. So, like now, that's the step up. Now you're in a pincer.
Yep.
There's really no escape at this point.
There's nothing you can really do.
Yeah, you can't leave. Um, I mean, granted, it is Alexandria. This is still one of the largest, wealthiest, and most well fortified cities. So, like, nothing's decided yet. This is what he needs just to even begin a shot at full, total victory if he wants it.
Mhm.
Um, as Octavian then moved, um, he marched towards Alexandria, and it is here that Antony seemed to get one final resurgence of the energy he once had, which I would dare say red flag again.
Very much
We
so.
see that where it's like for a
He-
moment they come back.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Um Now psychology is one of my favorite things to study. When you have somebody that has had suicidal ideations where attempts have been made, things like that. One of the biggest red flags is all of a sudden they go from the mopey,
Mm-hmm.
um, can't see the light, and
Depressive,
then
yeah, from a depressive
depressive,
state
and then
to
all of a
manic.
sudden they are so happy. They feel free. Everything feels great. That's when they have a plan.
Yeah, or like right, and we're getting there. We're getting
Hmm.
so, and I think this next story is going to kind of prove your point. He was determined to wage another assault simultaneously on land and sea, and preceding that was one final morbid dinner because now they're the companions to the death. Remember
Yep.
that night before Octavian had pulled his fleet into the harbor. He had camped himself just outside of Alexandria's eastern gates near the Hippodrome. Meanwhile, back at the palace, surrounded by friends, Antony urged his servants to drink copiously, as they have no such opportunity the next day, when they might well have a new master.
Yep.
He even said of himself that he would be at best, quote, a mummy and a nothing. That sounds optimistic,
But he's happy.
but he's happy. Right. Um,
Which
his
makes it
men wept.
worse.
Right. And I think that so like when and we'll reframe it in a minute, but
Mhm.
yeah. His men wept at this, but he reassured them that he wished only for an honorable death and had no desire to involve them with useless battles. So that brings us to where we left Antony last time. Although Antony had scored a small victory over Octavian's worn out troops as they approached, because I mean, they are worn out. They just did a huge march from all the way up, the, Levant, essentially, in Phoenicia, all the way down into Egypt. That's a hell of a trek through a lot of desert, but,
Indeed.
but, um, but as we saw last time, right, his naval fleet and then his cavalry soon defected afterwards. By this point, there was no denying the war was over, and they had lost it all. I just want to put on my tinfoil hat for a minute, okay? And I don't like doing this because I'm a historian, This is not my. I mean, as historians, we have kind of like niches, and I like to think that I love all of the niches, but in theory, I've only done writings on like a handful of things, But this is me with a little bit of just facts, no facts, just vibes, because it's the ancient world.
Mhm.
What if it wasn't that they defected?
What if he told them to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he had hoped he would have died in that cavalry charge.
Probably. And realistically, when we look at the pattern of behavior, um yeah, I think that is heavily possible, especially when you look at his behavior the night before, how he's trying to get his people to enjoy. He literally meant to go out swinging.
Yeah.
So
And
even though it might be tinfoil hat, at the same time, it is incredibly plausible, and we don't know necessarily what he spoke to his
yeah,
commanders and all of that. We don't
yeah, because
know.
we're only getting we don't have a record of his or Cleo's. This is all hindsight.
Hmm.
At best, it's Augustan propaganda, the only person who was there.
Hmm.
Otherwise, a lot of this is written by people 100, 200, 300 years later. And sometimes
Exactly.
Shakespeare leaks in, to these stories because, um, yeah. So, I
Yep.
mean, I just do find that's the narrative that makes the most sense to me based off of everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
Maybe they did defect, but I feel like even if they did, there was something there where he wasn't surprised. And he kind of
I
opened that
almost feel like
door,
he
if nothing
wanted
else.
them to,
Yeah.
because needless
Or
death is needless death.
or like expected them to,
Yeah.
and like gave them the verbal so that way they wouldn't feel bad.
Yeah.
Like even if he didn't tell them go, it would have been like, they're probably going to defect, and we've fought together and shit like that. I want them to feel like that if they feel like they have to defect, that I won't hold a grudge.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just again, the story about the party could be propaganda for all I know. I'm just saying, based off of no, we don't have the other half of the story, so it is what it is. But
Correct.
it's just speculation.
So what happened next is still heavily debated. Everything from motivations, acts, and even how the suicides were carried out are contentious. We only have one side of the story, as we've said, Octavian's or Augustus's, whatever you want to title him. Little twerp. and the records of Roman men who came hundreds of years after these deaths. So, time. And as we have seen time and time again on this series, they had no love for either of them, especially Cleopatra. But it starts with Antony.
Mark Antony would have stood on a rising ground just outside the city, his eyes fixed on the harbor. He had marched out at dawn, expecting a clash of titans. His infantry was positioned. His galleys were rowing out to meet Octavian's fleet. He was ready for one last defiance, a final gamble to hold the East. Instead, he had just watched the unthinkable. At least according to the main storyline. This is why I'm going with the main storyline theme.
Indeed.
Maybe he wasn't surprised, but I digress. As his triremes approached the enemy, the oars stopped. There was no ramming speed, no flight of arrows. His prowmen raised their oars in salute. Octavian's men returned it. In moments, the two fleets merged into one, turning their prows together toward the city, towards him. I also want to take a moment that if my theory is correct, this makes a lot of sense too, just of how Rome works, right? If these men die, they will die traitors.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was important to Antony, especially by the end there, being on the other side of it, knowing what it feels like to be a outcast and abandoned by your own people, maybe giving them that gift that they can go home proud.
Yeah.
And Romans. But again, that's my spin. And if I ever write in historical fiction, that's how I'm doing it. Anyway, so
well, the thing is, it's not unfounded. Let's be real.
No. I mean, again, it's like for all my facts, just vibe stories, all of my tinfoil hats, they are based off of some kind of like rationality and substantiated truth, right? And like as we've explained it, like this based off what we've known about the culture and things like, it makes sense. I just don't have proof. I don't have a letter written by anybody, And the only letters we have written, as we've said, to death is just these other guys who have no reason to paint it any other way.
Exactly.
But yeah, of course, we have to take what they say as quote unquote truth, even though we damn well know they were probably lying through their fucking teeth through most of it. So what I'm saying is honestly probably just as factual as them, but they're the ones who are official, not me. And I can respect that. But anyway, so as he watched, his cavalry, witnessing the defection at sea, broke rank and galloped over to enemy lines. He was left with nothing but a confused infantry and the crushing weight of realization. It was over. He rode back to the city, not as the god Dionysus, not as a conqueror, or not even as a general, but as a failure. Perhaps the rage began to boil, a hot, blinding suspicion. He might have been wild with emotion, screaming curses and blaming everyone around him of betrayal. In his panic and paranoia, he may have even blamed those closest to him, even his beloved Cleopatra, who he suspected had sold him to his enemies to save herself. Which I feel like no, right? Because we saw the letter that said where he tried to sell himself to spare Cleopatra. So would he even have been mad?
Yeah,
but that is the story that gets handed to us.
This is the story that's handed to us. And here's the thing. It has plot holes.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like, wait a minute, guy. You just said that he tried to like surrender himself and that was left unread, but then he's mad when she proposes it. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's weird.
And
But like that is
unlikely.
the story that like Cleopatra's so afraid of him that she had done bounced early, which I could believe per se. You know, people are irrational, and maybe he was getting a little violent at the end. I don't know, but the point being is that like yeah, because he was screaming for her and blaming her and all, and like said you traitor, you sold me out, and it's like okay, but he literally anyway.
Yeah.
But that's the story we're going with. So back to the story. He is said to have stormed through a palace, a broken Titan, calling her name in fury, but she wasn't there. Cleopatra, perhaps seeing what was coming, or perhaps terrified of Antony's violent mental breakdown, had already fled to her unfinished mausoleum. It is described as a fortress of stone filled with her treasures of gold, ebony, ivory, and as we said, combustibles. And she had barred and sealed the great doors. What the motivation for what happened next is still a mystery to this day. I am going to put another disclaimer here. Remember when I said that this is going to be a deep dive and we're going to go into a lot of detail about suicide?
Yes.
It is quite graphic.
It is graphic. If you cannot handle it, that's okay.
We understand. You know, and the short story of it is that he takes his own life in a violent way, and that's all you need to know. And that it was not immediate, and that Cleopatra would get to see him one last time. Now, for everyone who wants to hear the details of this, on with the show. Perhaps to quell his rage, or perhaps to end the torment of uncertainty, she had sent a messenger to Antony with a final devastating lie that she was dead. Let's take a moment that while normally calculated and cool, that she herself was also thrust into one of the worst situations imaginable. So it's not unlikely that she herself was not making these decisions from a healthy mental place. Whatever the reason, because that's the thing. Some people argue, well, she was hoping he would take his own life because she knew that's what Roman men did. Or maybe that he would flee if, like, he realized there was nothing holding him there. We just don't
We
know
don't know.
what, or if all of those things, what was going through her head when she made that choice. But this is what happened. Whatever the reason, Antony's rage reportedly vanished in an instant, only to be replaced with a hollow, eerie calm. Red flag. The man who had commanded legions, had fought in the mud of Elysium and slept in the trenches of Gaul, who had sailed through storms to relieve Caesar's legions in Greece, had worked the mobs of Rome into a revolution, who had declared the embodiment of a god, and who had divided the Roman world itself, unbuckled his breastplate. He looked at his servants, his voice devoid of thunder, that had once intimidated the Senate. Perhaps thinking fortune had taken away the only thing that was holding him to this place, and retreated into his private chambers. Antony called for his most faithful servant, a man rather poetically named Eros, which I did look into it. Stacy Schiff, that is the name she uses for the servant. It's also what Shakespeare names that character. So I don't know if he was neat. I'm assuming then that he was not just naming that. I thought, okay, like I originally wasn't going to write Eros. So like that has to be like poetry, right? Like that's got to be
Yeah,
Shakespeare.
because, being
And
killed by
then
Cupid.
Right, by love. Right. And I'm like, this seems, but then no, apparently, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's why I included it.
Okay.
So there's some irony, I guess, there.
And honestly, just as kind of like an aside, because um, Caesar was attributing himself to Venus and having that
Mhm.
Venusian connection between Venus and Eros, that just,
Yeah. Oh, and it's about to get worse in a minute, guys. So,
yep.
if this guy's name is true, right? So, so the man named poetically named Eros, whom he had long ago made a vow to kill him if this day ever came. Antony bared his neck, bracing for the blow that would send him to the Elysian fields. The most likely terrified servant, nonetheless, obeyed and drew the sword. The metal hissed against sheath, but instead of striking his master, the servant had turned the blade back and drove it into his own chest, falling dead at Antony's feet. Love has died.
Love died.
Legend and Shakespeare state that Antony stared at the body, stunned by the loyalty, and proclaiming he had been taught a supposed lesson by this servant. One last lesson. He picked up the sword. It would have been heavy and still slick with his servant's blood. This time, Antony did not attempt to strike his own neck, but instead plunged the blade deep into his own stomach in an attempt to copy his now deceased servant and drove it deep.
Mm.
The pain would have been immediate and blinding, but the blow would prove not to be immediately fatal. The angle had been wrong, perhaps, due to anxiety or maybe the human instinct of self-preservation, and his hand had shook. And you do see this sometimes where someone's intent is one thing, but for some reason the brain kind of overrides it.
Mm-hmm. The brain is
Um,
a magnificent thing.
and like it is fascinating. And sometimes people go like, "Oh, we'll see, they weren't serious," and like that.
That has nothing to do with anything, I promise.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, and like or just stress and the shake, like just God.
Mm-hmm.
This is some dark stuff, guys. This is not the happy episode. This is
No.
not the happy episode. And there's no jokes being made here, So he he is reported to have collapsed onto the bed, the sword falling from his grip. The rush of death he expected did not come. Instead, the flow of blood slowed, and he lay there, writhing in agony, begging the guards, the servants, anyone to just finish him, to strike the final blow. But they shrank away in horror. The most powerful man in the East was laying, groaning, and shaking in a pool of his own blood, and the room emptied, leaving him alone in his pain.
Ugh.
Then a new sound cut through his haze of suffering. It was Diomedes, Cleopatra's secretary, who burst into the room. He brought the truth. The queen had lived. She was locked in the monument, and hearing of his attempt, begged him to be brought to her. You know, I just thought of something because this part was also kind of confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Why would she reveal the truth if she had sent that original message?
I
What
don't
if
think she
Octavian
did.
had sent?
I
What
had
if
that exact
Octavian
same
did?
thought.
Like
Exact same thought.
like essentially she's dead. You should kill yourself.
Yeah.
But like he was like, okay, if I tell him I killed her, he'll be mad. But like if I tell him she did it to herself,
Because realistically, do we
oh,
know why necessarily she was in the mausoleum
we'll
with
get there. I
everything?
think it. Well, I think we kind of touched on that. So like it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna hole up here with the fucking money, and then he's gonna have to come to me. And then I can, and my theory is that she was trying to negotiate her way out of there. Right?
Yeah,
I got all the money, and if you want this fucking shit, you're gonna let me leave. And you're gonna
exactly.
give me a plane, you know, and I'm and he's like, what the fuck's a plane? She's like, don't worry about it, you'll find out in 2,000 years. But like
We have to find
I
some
want a
kind of
private
jovial
jet.
thing here.
You're gonna get a car and drive me to a private jet, and I'm gonna fly to India. Which India at this point may have had internal plumbing, so it was better.
Indeed.
But yeah, the point just being, yeah. So that's why I think we know she's holed up there. It doesn't seem like Antony knew she was there though.
No, and that's the part that's interesting.
Which
Especially
to me, this
here's another theory, okay? Another tinfoil hat, because victory is written by the or history is written by the victors.
yeah.
And there is so much bias in these stories
Mm-hmm.
as they are written. We know that Antony's army defected. Like the navy
Yeah.
defected, the cavalry defected, they all defected. What if Octavian had people in them already?
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
because he I think Octavian could kind of guess what Cleopatra would do, because realistically, how is she going to bargain for something that she is not right on top of?
yeah. But here's my thought on this, right? So, like, we'll say, and this is a whole nother rabbit hole, and you're going to notice that I didn't say that her tomb was in Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
The stories write it that way, but that's going to be a Patreon episode where we talk about some really cool stuff coming out of Egypt right now about the potential location of her tomb, which it would be next to a temple of Isis and all the descriptors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does add some drama to this story. But anyway, the point is, I read Diomedes coming in, right, as all right, so Antony was on the wall, everyone's done left and bounced, right?
Yep.
Cleopatra's getting news of this. She's like, all right, I'm getting the puck out Dodge. I got the money's hold up there. I'm heading there. And then she's like, yo, you guy, go tell Antony, because he doesn't know this. Go to the palace, let him know. Let him know that, like, where to meet me. And this
Yeah.
poor fucker comes in to that.
And that makes sense to me.
That's
That
why
makes
he
so
was
much more
there.
sense.
That's why he's there, not as an oopsie daisy. I mean, again, maybe that is exactly how it happened. I don't know. I'm just saying in a more, to me, if I was writing this story, right, pretend this is all fiction, and I was an editor, I'd be like, that's not very believable. Maybe write it this way. That's more believable.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. And
and
that's
just
the
as
thing.
dramatic.
That's the thing. There are plot holes here. There are plot holes here where like they're just demonizing these people just at every turn. Like she told him she was dead. She's not dead. Like
She was just hoping he would kill himself. And it's like, oh, wow. Okay. That seems all very dark. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's just a lot of work.
it's
A
a lot
lot of
of
work.
work, and if we are looking at everything one in terms of a mind that is not reasonable right now, is it plausible? Sure. From what we know of her, I don't think she
Hmm.
would do that.
Yeah. And like, I just feel like she had so many opportunities before where it would have actually benefit, I suppose, her. Yeah, she didn't. So why do this? And then why send it just a oopsie daisy, just kidding messenger directly from her secretary? That's odd. It's odd.
Yeah,
I
it
just,
makes no
if
sense.
in my fan fiction, she did not tell him that it was actually Octavian who may have like forged it. Anstey wasn't being really scrupulous with this sort of scrutinizing these sort of things because he's not in a good mental place and took his face value.
Exactly.
And then this poor guy who was coming there to let him know what the next steps were finds him bleeding out on the floor.
Yep.
So, no matter what the case, For a moment, despair had lifted. What would have gone through his head in this moment? Confusion? I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
Anger? Panic? Joy? Relief? Perhaps all of these at once. Antony ceased his groaning. It demanded to be lifted up and brought to his queen. This is where, like, if the story is true, but also like where they're archaeologically digging up, this has got to
Mm-hmm.
be pretty intense.
Yeah.
Because if it was right in Alexandria, I guess it's not as crazy, but like, wow. But again, if his wound wasn't that deep, again, they're only a couple hours away. I mean, pretty intense. Anyway, his remaining servants carried him, his life leaking out of him with every step through the streets of Alexandria, all the way to the foot of this mausoleum. But the doors could not be opened once sealed. So, from a window high above, Cleopatra herself and two of her waiting women lowered ropes. They tied them around the dying Antony, and what followed was a scene of grotesque tragedy. Plutarch describes it as the most pitiful sight of the war. The immense, heavy frayed Antony, soaked in blood, dangling in the air, spinning helplessly as women pulled. Cleopatra, her face strained and tear streaked, hauled on the ropes with all her strength, while Antony reached his hands towards her, unable to help himself. They finally heaved him over the sill and onto the floor. Cleopatra is said to have tore at her clothes in grief, beating her breasts and scratching her face. She wiped the blood from his face with her own hair, calling him her lord, her husband, her emperor. Antony, sensing the end, is said to have tried to calm her. He asked for a cup of wine, which this is kind of an, I don't want to say neat detail. I don't want to make light of this, but it reminds me when we talked about Dionysus.
Mm-hmm.
He's a god of resurrection.
He is.
So maybe in this moment, he was trying to reenact that moment.
Quite possibly.
He did not lament his defeat, though, which again tells me red flag about that whole they defected thing.
Yes.
In his final moments, the soldier is said to have reemerged. He told her to save herself if she could, and to do so with honor. He told her not to pity him for this last turn of fortune, but to remember him for who he was. As the Egyptian sun might have set over the city, he could no longer hold, and Mark Antony closed his eyes in the arms of the woman he had loved and breathed his last. Cleopatra was alone now. I'm getting like teary eyed. That's so
Yeah.
sad.
It's
Oh my
it's
god.
incredibly sad. It's incredibly sad.
Ah. And we've made a lot of jokes this season with the kinky boots and him throwing up in the Senate and, all sorts of shit. But like,
We've gotten
these,
emotionally attached to them.
yeah, and like, these are real people. I know that they're rich, Jeffrey Bezos-esque rich fucks, but like, I like to think that they're, we're all human, right? And like, no one should go through this kind of shit.
God, no.
Like in my story, in another universe, Antony had, like I said last episode, retired. He gave it up. He was content with just being married to Cleo and didn't give Octavian that ammunition, right?
Yeah.
And just enjoyed his family.
And that's what we wish for them.
Like that they're in the garden, drinking with their friends, kids playing out in the fountains and the pools and the lotus.
You're gonna make me
And
cry.
just,
Stop that.
I know. And like these kids don't get separated and like,
Yeah. The silence in the mausoleum was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of Cleopatra's waiting women, Iris and Charmian. Antony was gone. His massive frame lay still, the blood turning dark on the stone floor. But outside, the wheel of history was still grinding forward. The chaos of Antony's suicide had breached the walls of the monument. One of Antony's guards, a man named Dersatius, had snatched the bloody sword from the floor, hidden it under his cloak, and slipped away to the enemy camp. He ran straight to Octavian. He did not speak. He simply produced the sword, still wet with the blood of the man who had ruled the East. And this here is what makes me think, okay,
mhm. Yep.
there were enemies within.
And
This was planned. This was coordinated.
yep, this is the man who left the note. This is the man who left the note. He was told, you leave that note, make sure he finds it, and then when he does the deed, report back to me, and this is how you're going to prove it.
Exactly.
And that's a trophy. The sword that slew Antony.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
And and like to a degree, I'm not mad at this man. I mean, he's one of us. He's a normie. Like more than likely, but like he's just trying to live,
Yeah.
and I'm sure maybe Antony even knew,
Possibly.
but yeah, I don't think he knew about the letter clearly, but yeah.
So Octavian, the young Caesar, looked at the weapon. The rivalry that had torn Rome apart for over a decade had ended in a moment of rusted iron and desperation. According to Plutarch, Octavian did not gloat. He retreated into his tent and wept. My ass.
Bull.
My
Shit. Okay, keep going.
lily white ass. He wept for his brother-in-law, his former colleague, his co-ruler, my ass. He read aloud the letters. He read aloud the letters that they had exchanged, my ass. Perhaps to justify himself to his generals, my ass. Showing
I'm
that
sure
he had
humped
been
a goddamn onion, and I'm sure he did read those damn letters. Oh, but we have to include it because that's what the record says.
But showing that he had been reasonable while Antony had been mad. My lily white ass.
But you remember when I said about those damn letters that he was holding on to them?
Yep.
Yes, sir. Because it's all a game.
It's all a game. They're pieces on the board. They are not people. But Octavian was a politician first, a human second, a human 10th. Are you kidding?
I know.
The tears dried quickly because they weren't real.
Yeah, because he didn't have an onion under his nose anymore.
Exactly. He wanted Cleopatra alive. She was the jewel for his triumph in Rome. Without her chained behind his chariot, his victory was incomplete. Octavian sent his most trusted man, Proculius, to the monument with strict orders. Do not let her die. Proculius arrived at the massive doors. They were bolted tight. He spoke to the queen through the cracks in the wood. Inside, Cleopatra, voice trembling but defiant, demanded the kingdom of Egypt for her children. Outside, Proculius promised her safety and Octavian's benevolence, but he was scanning the walls, looking for a weakness. He left without a deal. The next day, while another envoy, Gallus, distracted Cleopatra by talking to her through the locked door, Proculius returned with 2 servants and a ladder. This sounds very cartoonish. Very,
Yeah.
very cartoonish.
But also, remember when I was like, this kind of gives like the bank robbery vibe. That's where I was like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
this is like, hey, you're gonna let me go, and this is where I think it started. But you notice he's like shaking and stuff. Like, I think this stuff with Antony really threw her for a loop. That was not a part of the plan. You know,
No.
like, Antony was supposed to be in there with her.
Yeah.
Not like this though. You know,
Not
like,
like this,
hey,
though.
meet me here, because then she would have had him and some guards. They would have been able to like defend it. You know, and she would have had an like the muscle. But right now it's just her, this secretary, maybe.
Well, the
And maybe he's
secretary's
still.
outside. The secretary's
Yeah, he was
outside, and
gone.
she
He was
has
gone.
2 maids with her, pretty much.
Right. Badass bitches. We're not saying they aren't, but like,
No.
what are they gonna do? And that's why I'm like, okay, you don't even have anyone watching the window. Is it cartoonish? Yes. Could I see someone who's not in a great mental state? Yes. Also,
Yes.
things are definitely not going to the plan.
No, nothing is going to plan.
But she's trying. She's trying to stick to the plan.
But quietly, invisibly, my ass invisibly, they scaled the side of the mausoleum. They climbed through the very same high window where Antony had been hauled up hours before. They dropped down into the room behind her. One of the women, Charmian, who had been with Cleopatra her entire life, first as her nurse, her wet nurse, like she nursed her,
Mm-hmm.
and now
Literally.
as a cherished advisor, turned and saw the Romans descending like wolves into the sanctuary. She cried out, and Cleopatra spun around. Seeing the Romans, she snatched a small dagger from her belt, intending to drive it into her own heart. She would not be paraded in Rome. But
Which I would say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Which I would say, I don't know about this part. I could believe it, but also, like, why go through the whole point of the kindling and shit? You know, like,
Yeah.
if I were the editor writing the story, I would say, and she had a torch, and say, come and. I mean, she could have meant to take her own life, and like, I will go down with this goddamn ship. But like, right. But like, instead, again, maybe through the propaganda, like, oh, she tried stabbing herself. And it's like, because it's more poetic, and it's definitely what Romans would do.
Yes, but she
That's
had
why I'm like,
kindling
these
in
little
there.
hints.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's these little hints. But if true, again, here we go. She's descending now. So.
Yeah. But obviously, Proculius was faster. He lunged forward, grabbing her from behind. He seized her wrists, wrestling the blade away. It is said that he, in this moment, stated, "For shame, Cleopatra! You wronged both yourself and Caesar by trying to deny him the chance to show his mercy." He then shook her robe, checking for hidden poison, and secured her. The Queen of Kings was now a captive in her own tomb, forced to sit beside the cooling corpse of her husband.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, reads his propaganda.
Very much
with
reads
him.
as propaganda.
But just I would say put a pin in this part right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Imagine if you had watched and held and you're covered in his blood. You know, we'll say husband because at this point they were practically married, right? Like, you know, your husband, the love of your life, in your arms, watched him fucking die just like not even, you know, a day ago, right? And then now you're forced to sit next to this body.
You're forced to sit next to a cooling corpse, but at the same time, it is the body that you loved. That you love.
Possibly for days.
For days. Watching it
Yeah.
change.
And tell me if you'd be cool mentally after that.
Fuck no. Fuck no.
But anyway.
Right. Now, days later, the final scene played out. Octavian himself came to the palace to which she had been moved. He entered the room to see the woman who had seduced Caesar and Antony. It was a shock. He did not find the goddess Isis in her finery. He found a woman broken by grief. Cleopatra was dressed in a simple tunic, her hair wild, her eyes sunken and red. Her chest was reportedly covered in scabs and bruises from where she had beaten herself in mourning. My ass. I
Well,
can
no, no, no,
guarantee you.
no, no. I would say actually this might be true.
Mm,
This was in the ancient world in general, but especially in Egypt, this was a very common mourning practice when you love someone.
were you beat
Um,
and scratched at yourself in the chest?
yeah, yes. There's actually a lot of
Mm,
imagery of it too, like in tombs
okay.
and stuff. But the Greeks actually did this a lot too. Is they would actually hire people to do this, like the more people who mourned you, the better, I guess. But like it was
Well,
a
yes.
given that the love, like the wife, the loved one in particular, would do this. You know,
Okay.
so I
I
mean,
mean,
it's a public display of your grief, like to show
I
how
will
much you
withhold
care.
judgment, but at the same time, like, mm,
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
would say, if anything, if they said, yeah, she was cool and beautiful and everything, that's a bull-faced lie.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, she is not dressed nice. She is not, she don't give a fuck, Keisha, anymore. And she's been isolated, alone with this body. I mean, so just the mental, I mean, I would say that normally this was like more ceremonial, the performative act. In her case, by that point, probably not.
Yeah.
Like she probably did. And it was like they would beat their chests and claw at their necks and their breasts. And like it was a big performance. Yeah. Like we should absolutely do an episode, like maybe for the Patreon on it at some point, like this
Morning
morning practice.
practices.
This,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So I could believe it.
So, according to Octavian, so grain of salt, huge grain of salt, potentially the
This,
entire
I was
Dead
gonna say,
Sea.
this is the bullshit.
Yeah.
This is the bullshit.
When he entered, she leapt from her daybed and flung herself at his feet. She tried to use her old magic, the charm, the voice, the intellect. She showed him busts of Julius Caesar, claiming she had only done what Rome's greatest men had wanted. She handed him an inventory of her treasures, claiming she had held nothing back.
This makes me ragey.
Yeah, no, this pisses me off.
So my fan
Now,
fiction, just before we get into the nitty gritty, is he walked to that room. She looked a hot mess, gave him the dirtiest fucking look, and said nothing. That is what I think. She
agreed.
couldn't give him the goddamn time of day. He already had what he wanted.
Why would I make it
And she
easier for you?
yeah. If she was in a more panicked state, maybe she would have said something along the lines of like, what I offered is still on the table. Please just let my family go.
Yeah, because, well,
You
preservation
have
of her
what you wanted.
children.
Please just let us go. But that would be the only begging I could imagine. Not this like, oh, I'll suck your dick for you, daddy. If you just like, I'll do it just like I did for your daddy. Like, come on. This
It's
is some
gross.
Roman incel bullshit.
It is.
Bullshit.
It definitely is. Now we have to remember who exactly is telling the story here, right? This goes against everything we have come to know about Cleopatra's character, and quite honestly, it comes off more as, like you said, Roman incel fantasy. However, we should also remember that she would not have been in a very good place. She has lost everything and has had to spend days with the corpse of the man that she loved, who had died by his own hands, perhaps due to her own actions.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. She was at the mercy of a sociopath, and who knows if she had eaten or done anything in all this time.
Yeah.
In any case, Octavian was supposedly unmoved. He looked at her not with desire, but with cold curiosity. He dismantled her arguments one by one with a lawyer's precision. He did not smile. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor or stared blankly at her. He told her to be of good cheer, and that she would be treated with gentleness. My ass. My ass! But Cleopatra knew the language of power better than anyone. As Octavian turned to leave, his gentleness ringing false in the air, she saw the truth in his eyes. He did not see a queen, he saw a trophy. She requested one final mercy, to be allowed to pour libations over the tomb of Antony. Octavian granted it. As she stood over Antony's grave, she spoke to the dust. She lamented that while they could not be separated in life, they were likely to be separated in death. He, a Roman lying in Egypt, and she, an Egyptian, destined to lie in Italy as a prisoner. Hide me, bury me here with you, she prayed. For amongst all my bitter misfortunes, nothing has been so terrible as this brief time that I have lived without you. This is where Cleopatra's most famous legend begins. It is said that she had made her decision. The asp and the basket of figs were already on their way. The realization that she was merely a prop for Octavian's glory crystallized into a resolve as hard as diamond. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, would not walk in chains. It was August 12th, 30 BCE, less than 2 weeks after Antony's death. Cleopatra dismissed her entourage, retaining only her 2 most loyal confidants, Eras and Charmian. She ordered a bath. After washing the dust of mourning from her skin, she dressed, not in the simple tunic of a captive, but in the full terrifying splendor of the Queen of Kings. She put on her finest robes, likely the garb of the goddess Isis, and called for a lavish meal. While she ate, a peasant arrived at the gates. The guards stopped him, suspicious. The man held up a basket. He peeled back the leaves to show them nothing but large, ripe figs. He even offered one to the guards with a smile. Perhaps disarmed by his simplicity, they let him pass. They did not know that beneath the fruit lay a small Egyptian cobra, an asp. After the meal, Cleopatra took a tablet and wrote a letter to Octavian. She sealed it and handed it to a guard to be delivered immediately. Then she ordered everyone out of the chamber except for Eras and Charmian, and the heavy doors swung shut.
Across the city, Octavian broke the seal of the letter. As his eyes scanned the wax, and supposedly his blood ran cold. The letter contained no pleas for mercy, no political bargaining. It was a simple, solemn request to be buried side by side with Mark Antony. And Octavian knew instantly what that meant. He leapt up, intending to run to the palace himself. But instead he dispatched his guards at a sprint. Because let's be real, he remembered he was Octavian, and Octavian doesn't do anything in person. He's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? This is not like me. He was editing his own stories. Like, oh yeah, that's right, I don't run. They were to prevent the suicide at all costs.
Inside the chamber, it is said Cleopatra approached the basket of figs. She moved the leaves aside. Legend tells it that she did not hesitate. There was no weeping, no trembling. She provoked the snake, perhaps with a golden spindle, until it rose from the dark coils, and she offered her arm. The bite was quick. 2 small punctures. The venom of the asp is a neurotoxin. It does not cause a violent convulsive death of hemlock and strychnine. It brings a heavy, narcotic drowsiness. A heaviness seized her limbs. She lay back on her golden couch, arranging her robes with perfect dignity, ensuring that even in death, she would look like a queen. Eras collapsed at her feet, dying first. Charmian, stumbling and weak, stood at the head of the couch, desperately trying to adjust the diadem on her mistress's brow, her hands shaking as the poison took hold.
The Roman guards burst through the doors. They had run across the city, breathless, hoping to save their emperor's prize. Because, yes, he's at this point an emperor, right? Like, we can agree
Mm-hmm.
on that? Yeah.
Exactly.
hmm But they were too late. The scene they met them the scene that met them was a tableau of stillness. Cleopatra lay dead on the couch of gold. Iris was dead on the floor. Charmian was barely standing, leaning over the queen, fumbling with the crown. One story says that one of the guards, furious at the loss of the triumph, shouted at the dying handmaiden, "A fine deed this is, Charmian."
Charmian, however, fighting for her last breath, turned her eyes to the Roman. "It is indeed most fine," she whispered, "and befitting the descendant of so many kings." And then she, too, collapsed and died.
Octavian is said to have arrived shortly after. He brought in Psyle, snake charmers known for sucking venom from wounds, but the queen was beyond reach. He examined her arm, found no weapon, no cup of poison, only two tiny dots, almost invisible pricks on her arm. Octavian was frustrated. His his triumph would have an empty chariot where the queen should have stood. But historians note that he also is said to have felt a grudging admiration.
She had outmaneuvered him one last time. By dying by the snake, the symbol of divine royalty in Egypt, she had not died as a defeated politician, but as a goddess. He granted her final wish. She was embalmed with royal honors and laid to rest beside Antony. The tomb was sealed, leaving the lovers together in the darkness, while outside, the Roman Republic finally died, and the age of empire began. While the story of the asp and the lover's tomb is one that has echoed through the centuries, while modern historians look at these events with more skeptical clinical eye, the poetic death of Cleopatra and Antony was, in many ways, a narrative carefully curated and perhaps, more than likely, staged by Octavian himself.
Most historians today find the basket of figs story highly improbable. An Egyptian cobra, the asp, is a large snake. Like I feel like in art, it's always depicted as this tiny little thing. Maybe the size of your forearm because it's usually wrapped around her forearm and biting her bicep or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
No. This is a snake that's anywhere from 5 to 8 feet long.
Yep.
Yeah. So hiding it in a small basket of fruit, not likely. And having it bite three people in rapid succession, so Cleopatra, Eras, and Charmian, and delivering a failed dose to each is biologically unlikely, if not impossible.
It is, and I do want to put little asterisk here. If they actually got a baby, like it was a baby
Mm,
snake, that is actually possible because they cannot control their venom. And so having
Yeah,
those lethal doses because they don't know how to dry bite as of yet is possible. But
but would
realistically,
they
it would have
even have
unloaded
enough?
on the first one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would they even have enough? And I'm sure there's a study out there that's gone over this because there's a lot, guys, on this. Just there's documentaries, articles, all sorts of stuff that have gone back and forth on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So snakes are, shocking, cold blooded, and often dry bite when defensive, because that venom's not for you; it's for prey, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they like you said, if they unload it, then they could starve. So they're not likely to do that, especially if they're adults.
Exactly.
Um, so it's one theory that's out there is that maybe Cleopatra used a hollowed out hair comb or stylus filled with the pre-prepared toxic cocktail. Um, remember, she had just been with that doctor for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they said it wasn't probably hemlock, but the thing is like by mixing things like hemlock, wolfsbane, and opium, right, to mitigate some of those side effects,
Mm-hmm.
she could achieve this painless, drowsy death described by witnesses without the logistical mess of like a live reptile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, this sort of poison is actually something we covered on our Patreon series about Hecate. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
we keep shamelessly dropping our Patreon. Please go look at it.
Ta-da!
but but these pharmaceuticals would have been definitely been known by the Greek Cleopatra, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're not even touching like all the Egyptian medicine. Um, and she herself had conducted many experiments with this over the years. Um, so the speed of the Roman reaction is also suspicious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this whole thing has been suspicious. Let's be real, but this is one that historians agree it's not fan fiction. Uh, like it's not me. It's not just me.
But you are a historian, honey.
I know, I
You need
know,
to accept this about yourself.
I
You
know.
have the
I just
degree.
haven't done like a, but it's also, I'm not like an Egyptologist. I haven't done like entire years worth of academic like research and writing on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's more what I mean. Like historians who actually, this is their shit. Like, you know, they've made their entire careers out of this.
Mm-hmm.
This specific thing. But they agree that this seems a little odd. Because he needed Cleopatra. One thought is that maybe he needed Cleopatra dead because a living queen was a rallying point for rebellion, as they will find out in like 100 years with Boudica.
Indeed.
You know, like hmm, uh, maybe he understood that, and when future people didn't. So by promoting the story of her suicide, though, right? Because here's the thing: he couldn't execute her without appearing a tyrant, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
saw what happened with Bernie Sanders III, right? They
Indeed.
were big mad. Like the Alexandrians, they know how to party hardy. Um, they need a succession crisis almost, right?
Yes.
So, and he's a political animal. He is good at the long game. He's good at all this subtle crap. So by promoting her story as a suicide, Octavian could turn a political execution into a tragic romance. It made him look
Mm-hmm.
like the merciful victor who tried to save her rather than the man who drove a mother to her death.
Yep.
So, because so this is like her that's the mystery, right? We can either take this at face value or let's just make a small list of possible options, right? Option A, story at face value. There's a snake, all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
B, there's not a snake, but she had been able to smuggle poison in somehow,
Well, if
and
it
did
was
this
in
to
a
herself
comb,
and
if it
all.
was in a stylus, like it makes sense.
Right, right. You know, and that, but all the other crap is still take it for face value.
Yes.
Octavian running, remembering what his character is, you know, all that.
Not like me.
Then that leads us to story C. What? Because Romans did this. What if he presents it to her and says, "Here's an out." She's not in a good headspace because it has to get past these guards.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put that story out there, then it's just like you don't have to worry about the guards because they already know. They just have to play their role,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or D is that he just directly poisons her. There's no consent.
Yep.
Yes, because the fact that these three women died in a high security lockdown under Roman guards, because again, they're just throwing a feast with no permission. That seems weird too, right? Suggests that the guards were either catastrophically incompetent, which I mean, it's giving Epstein. You know, it's giving Epstein.
Yes.
Yeah, the cameras are turned off.
I wonder why.
Or they were ordered to look the other way. turn off the cameras for about 4 minutes.
Indeed.
But whatever really happened, like Epstein, seems to have been lost to us. The only thing we know for sure, however it happened, is that Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of an independent Egypt, was gone.
To this day, the tomb of Antony and Cleopatra has never been found. Despite the legend that they were buried together in the mausoleum, many archaeologists, including those searching at sites like Taposiris Magna, suspect the tomb was either destroyed during the later Roman riots in Alexandria or was never as grand as the poem suggests. Octavian allowed the burial because it signaled the absolute end of the Ptolemaic line. By putting them in the ground together, he was closing the book on the Hellenistic age. Historians generally agree that while the emotions of the tragedy were real, Antony was a broken man and Cleopatra was a trapped sovereign, the method was likely a calculated pharmacological exit. Cleopatra was a scholar of poisons. She didn't need a snake to find the door. She chose a death that preserved her beauty and her dignity, denying Octavian the satisfaction of seeing her age in a Roman prison. The moment the heavy bronze doors of the mausoleum were finally forced open, the romantic tragedy ended and the cold administrative birth of the Roman Empire began. For Octavian, the death of Mark Antony and Cleopatra wasn't just the end of a war. It was the final cleanup of a messy corporate merger.
While the lovers were being buried with honors, Octavian was making cold-blooded decisions about their bloodlines. Like we had said, this is where the romantic version of the story ends, and the brutal reality of Roman power begins. As Antony's body was being prepared for burial, Alexandria was not a city of mourning, but a city of terror. Octavian did not enter as some liberator. He was a creditor because Octavian was not Julius Caesar. The first thing he did was consolidate the Ptolemaic treasury. Cleo was onto something there.
Cleo knew.
So,
Cleo had him
Cleo?
pegged.
We wish.
Oh, God. No, we don't. No, we do not, neither.
No, I do. You know, I wish that's my other happy ending is that he fails. He's brought to her, and she just sits there and watches him get pegged by someone. Not because she's into it, but just because
Because they're Romans, and if he's a bottom, then he's disgraced.
Yep, he's like literally drinking her wine, and literally fuck that twerp. Yeah, she's not the one doing it, but to also have a woman do it to him would be great.
Oh my God.
So the hairdressers.
The hairdressers.
No. But Cleopatra's wealth, the gold of 3 centuries of Greco-Egyptian rule, was so vast that when it was seized and transported to Rome, the interest rates in Roman market dropped from 12% to 4% almost overnight. That's insane. Yeah.
Jinx.
The influx of Egyptian bullion effectively funded the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. It's almost like he knew this. That's why he declared war in the first place.
Exactly.
Like, this was his game plan all along. It had nothing to do with Antony. Honestly, it's let's not even give him credit for he was mad at Antony and there was rivalry. There was no rivalry. He didn't give a shit. He was just here. No. He knew what he wanted, and these people were in the way. And he needed to get them out of the way while also benefiting himself.
Indeed.
And unlike his adoptive father, Octavian's mercy had very strict limits. Yeah, he wasn't Caesar like, you get forgiven, everybody gets forgiven. Yeah,
Caesar
look
is
under your
now
seats
Oprah. Oh my god.
with the boots.
With the boots. Oh my
He's like, look
god.
under your seat, and they pull out letters, and it's like, you're forgiven. Like, mercy. Um, he understood that as the male heir of Julius Caesar, he understood that as long as the male heir of Julius Caesar or Mark Antony lived, his own position was technically contested.
So this gets a little bit difficult to talk about because we are talking about kids. Okay.
Yep, this is so we're about to discuss the fate of each. We're trying in relative detail of what happens to each of these kids.
Yes. So another trigger warning. If you can't handle it, I get it. As a mom, I understand.
Because
Be
we
at
are in the
peace.
worst
Do what you got
possible
to do.
timeline.
We are in the worst
Yeah.
possible timeline.
Just know it doesn't end well for most of them.
No.
And that's why we're not hearing about them in mainstream.
Exactly.
That's the hint.
So while Antony was bleeding out in the mausoleum, 17-year-old Caesarion was already fleeing. His mother had been preparing for this for years. She packed him with chests of bullion and sent him south towards the port of Berenice on the Red Sea. The plan was desperate but visible. The plan was desperate but viable. Sail to India, find sanctuary with trade allies, and wait for the Roman storm to pass.
Oh, so this is sad. So she essentially is like, okay, she swapped.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, no, I'm not going to leave him here. Maybe that was the plan all along. It wasn't about her getting out of Dodge. It was for him.
She had to get her babies out.
Oh my God.
But
I'm crying.
it's okay. It's okay. We're going to get through this. But Caesarion was a Caesar. In the eyes of the boy's tutor, Roden, he was also a bargaining chip. As Caesarion reached the coast, Roden whispered a fatal lie. Octavian is a man of honor. He wants to give you the kingdom.
And this is so fucked up because, here's the thing. I feel like we've seen a lot of like tutors fucking kids over in the story.
Yep.
But really, that's not the case. It's kind of like the tutor is to these boys like the wet nurse was to the girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
These were guys who raised these kids. It wasn't just like, oh, okay, they go to school and they come home. Like they live with these kids. They put them to bed. They tell them stories. They get their food. Like
they're
put them
raising
up,
these babies. They become parents.
So this is not some rando they're like, why would they just put him with a tutor? That's weird. It's because this is essentially like a parent. You should trust these people.
Yes.
And like, that's so fucked.
But exhausted and perhaps naive, Caesarion turned back. He was intercepted by Roman scouts before he even reached Alexandria. He was not given a trial or a chance to speak. Octavian's logic was as sharp as a blade. 1 Caesar plus 1 Caesar equals civil war. To ensure that his own position as the son of God, Octavian had the teenager strangled or beheaded in secret. The true son of Julius Caesar was wiped from the earth, leaving only the adopted son to rule it. He was 17 years old.
And he was nowhere near home. He was alone.
Yeah. He was a baby. Like at 17, you're a baby.
And even then, this is because he was intercepted before he could get back. It's all the stories kind of describe it as he's in the desert alone. And again, this tutor, it's like, yeah, maybe he's naive or whatever, but again, when you should trust him, right? Like this is family. Should be implicit.
Pretty much.
And these relationships are so different, right? And it would be like, I don't know, like, so imagine you sent your baby, like, and I know this is like kind of a sloppy analogy, but like, imagine you send your baby to school, right?
Hmm.
And there's a school shooter. Terrible. We don't want to think about that. But like, imagine instead of the teacher locking the door, defending your child, they push your kid out into the hallway and lock the door behind them.
Yep. And that's
That is what
that is
happened
an
here.
accurate that is a very, very accurate thing.
And like, it's a lot different because like these kids, I'm sure teachers, I know a lot of teachers who love their kids. They wouldn't do that, right? But like, they're not like literally raising your child. They're not going home and making meals and stuff for them, telling them nighttime stories and shit like that. You know, like, it's an extra level. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, how could you do this? And like, also, what? Of course, he's going to believe him. He would have been
Why wouldn't
20
he?
something and would have believed him. And like, also, I'm sure this kid was raised to believe he was a god king. And also,
Absolutely.
like, honor was at stake. You have to go back. You have to. And I'm sure that was worked into it as well. And it just, but instead, he died alone in the desert where no one could see what happened.
Yeah. So, there are more babies.
Mm-hmm.
Antony's eldest son, by his Roman wife Fulvia, Marcus Antonius Antulus, was
Nope.
dragged from a statue of the deified Julius Caesar and beheaded for having assisted his father. Not so long after the deaths of his father and stepmother, Antylus's tutor Theodorus betrayed him to Octavian.
These damn tutors, man. Oh
Yep.
my God. Like, they have to be working for Antony or for Octavian at this point. They have to be like
Of course they are.
sleeper agents. I
Of
don't
course they
know.
are.
Oh my God.
Pleading in vain for mercy from Octavian, Antylus was dragged from the image of the now deified Julius Caesar by Roman soldiers.
Oh my God.
Octavian ordered his execution on the same day as that of Caesarion. After Antylus was beheaded, Theodorus took a precious stone that the young man had worn on a chain around his neck and sewed the stone into his belt. Although Theodorus denied the theft, Octavian tried him, found him guilty, and ordered his crucifixion. Antylus was 15 years old.
And oh my God, he's a 15-year-old kid. He
He's
was
a child.
crying.
He's a
He
baby.
because they said, he was pleading for mercy. It's like he is crying, sobbing, and God, the image, they dragged him away. Because essentially he's claiming sanctuary here, right? Because at this
Yeah.
point, they're starting this cult around Caesar. The idea of that a human being could transcend into godhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And God, this is the equivalent of like that scene from that Disney movie, the Disney Hunchback of Notre Dame. But imagine if Esmeralda had gone in there, claimed sanctuary, and Frollo had just kicked down the door, literally dragged her by her hair out to the street and killed her right there.
Yep. Yep.
That would have been a very short movie. But like, yeah, this is like, again, 15, right? 14, 15, like a freshman in high school.
But this is the kind of shit that people do when they are trying to change from republic to empire. Take notes because this is the kind of
Oh
shit
yeah,
that we see in modern day.
we are
When
seeing it happen in
people
real time.
we are seeing this happen in real time. When you have people busting down doors, murdering people with impunity,
Taking kids,
taking kids.
5-year-old kids, people disappearing.
I
I
hate
just,
how relevant this is. I
yeah, like,
absolutely hate how relevant this is.
also just like, I mean, I guess it's terrible to say, like the oldest person who's dying right now was 17.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just gonna get worse from here, guys. We will have a brief reprieve. I suppose, I don't know if you want to call it that. I'm gonna get into it. So remember, Antylus had a younger brother. Iolus Antonius was ultimately spared initially and sent to live in the orphanage that was Octavia's house. Like, this poor lady.
So
Oh
many
my
babies.
God. They're mostly not hers. Like,
Indeed.
oh my God. Anyway, He would go on to become a Roman magnate and poet. Following the civil wars, Iollas was granted high favors from Augustus, aka Octavian.
Mm-hmm.
This is where technically he's Augustus now.
Mm-hmm.
Through Octavia's influence, which again, she's fascinating. She is sounds like she's standing up for these kids that aren't even hers. Why? You know?
Because
But I kind of love it. Yeah.
motherhood does not require blood ties. Motherhood is about the kids.
Yeah. And like she's like, give this kid a fucking break. He's talented. He's been raised with us. Like, he's good. And like I love that. I love to think that he was like that. Because we need a silver lining at this point. We need it.
God, we need something.
Oh,
Possibly a drink.
oh girl. I thought about it, but I'm like, it was too early at 11 o'clock. like that.
I might need a shot after this.
I do not have the constitution to be the new Dionysus.
Neither do I.
Maybe the new Solinus, but that's about it. You will see me passed out, gut in the air, balls out. Like that's what I will not be that classy. So you're welcome. So
thank you for that visual image.
No problem. You can keep that in or cut it. I don't care. So anyway, this is why we don't teach kids.
Indeed.
But in 21 BCE, Augustus wanted his daughter Julia the Elder to marry Agrippa. Remember Julia? Remember when she was married to the Pirate King's kid there?
Yes.
As a baby?
As the baby?
And it didn't work out, clearly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but Agrippa was married to Iollas's stepsister, Claudia Marcella Major.
Mm-hmm.
Agrippa agreed to the marriage, so divorced Marcella, because that's something you can do, by the way, in Rome. So you didn't have to murder them, I guess, to get out of it. I suppose that's good.
Yeah.
And then, but don't feel bad, I guess, too bad. Well, I mean, I feel bad for Marcella because she's just cattle, but I guess she's not destitute. Good news. Yay.
Yay. Question mark.
Yay. Consequently, she was Marcella consequently obliged for Iollas to marry her. So that was arranged.
Mm-hmm.
So he got, this is terrible. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this, like, sloppy seconds. But like, again, it's not like she had a choice in any of this either. Like,
no, I don't think either of them had a choice.
Messed. This is what's messed about Augustus, right? No one has a choice here. Not Agrippa. Julia don't. Agrippa don't.
Mm-hmm.
Marcella don't. Iollas don't. All these people, even if they're some of the most powerful people, you have to answer to this dictator.
Mm-hmm.
So Augustan peace, my ass. Pax Romana, my ass. Everyone's terrified, and take notes.
Yep.
So apparently they had some stuff in common because there were kids. Okay, Iollas and Marcella's children included the sons, Iollas Antonius, because original,
Mm-hmm.
and Lucius Antonius, because he got that from his dad, and you guessed it, Iola Antonia.
Yay, they had a daughter.
And like, yay! That's what he got. He's definitely his father's son.
Yeah.
I know that was the naming convention at the time of just,
Ugh.
so many Antonias. Anyway, Iollas became praetor in 13 BCE and then consul in 10 BCE. And then a Asian proconsul from 6 to somewhere in 7 to 6 BCE. And he was apparently highly regarded by Augustus. Horace refers to him in a poem, speaking of an occasion when Iollas intended to write a higher kind of poetry, praising Augustus for his success in Gaul. Iollas was also a poet, clearly, and credited with having written 12 volumes of poetry on the Diomedia sometime before 13 BCE, but none of which have survived, unfortunately.
Mm.
So I feel like he's really living up to like the new Dionysus kind of legacy a little bit,
Indeed.
you know? Yeah.
It still lives
Maybe
in
a
him.
little of a pop. Yeah, a little, he's definitely his dad's son, which is kind of nice. Um, Although how their relationship began is uncertain, though. Iolus Antonius became a lover of Julia.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Agrippa died in 12 BCE, and Julia had been forced to marry her stepbrother, Tiberius. That
Keep it in the
Tiberius. Who was,
family, guys. Come on.
well, that's also unfortunate. It goes right back to it because Tiberius was forced to divorce his wife, who he loved.
Yeah.
And from all accounts, Julia's marriage to her stepbrother had been a disaster. She couldn't stand him, and he couldn't stand her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she was kind of headstrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she was just really bucking against her father, um, which good for her. And she was really desperate to divorce this guy, and Illis was open to satisfy her desires. I mean, I don't love this for Marcella, but whatever. But she was clearly attracted to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tiberius had left Rome in 8 BCE because he had just done bounced. He was over it, leaving behind Julia and her 5 children by Agrippa, including Gaius Caesar, Lucius Caesar, Julia the Younger, Agrippina the Elder, and Agrippa Postumus. Julia felt that her children were unprotected and may have approached Iolus to be a protector for her children, especially her 2 elder sons, Gaius Caesar and Lucius Caesar, who were Augustus's joint heirs. It's messy, and we have to do maybe like a like Julio Claudian arc at some point. But after this
Yeah.
one, no, it's going to be long, and I can't do it again for a little
No,
while.
this is down the line. Not now,
Yeah,
but later.
that would be an easy 34 episoder again, and I can't.
No.
I can't. Not right now. But both contemporary and modern historians have suggested maybe that Iolus had designs upon a monarchy, so maybe he was kind of becoming his dad.
A little bit.
And wanted to marry Julia before her children, Gaius and Lucius, came of age, possibly to form some sort of regency. But unlikely, however, that Julia would have put her father or sons at risk like that. I mean, she hated her dad, but you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it is possible that she planned a divorce from Tiberius and to make Iolus Antonius the protector of her sons. Again, and maybe it's all that was. He's I mean, that's a place of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe that would be a big fuck you to her dad, but keep her kids in. It's messy. Um,
Very
but
messy.
but no matter whatever their thoughts were, the scandal finally broke in the second year of BC when Augustus took action on his daughter Julia's copious promiscuity, because that was an embarrassment for him. Her audacity and
Mm-hmm.
autonomy with her body. That was a
Can't have
whole
that.
thing that was going against all of his political shit at that time too. He was really pushing against it, and it's literally your daughter's doing all the things you made illegal.
Yeah.
And Antonius was, of course, exposed as her number one lover.
Yikes.
So here we go. Yeah. Even this kid, he made it pretty far, but even Augustus killed him too. So, spoiler. He was charged with treason and sentenced to death because, the guy who charged him with treason is also the jury and everything else. And he subsequently killed himself. Supposedly. Seems like that's a story that keeps coming up. Yeah.
Indeed.
Though modern scholars have speculated that Iolus is one of the figures represented on the north face of the Ara Passus, a Roman altar. Dive into more about that because I wasn't sure what that meant, but it just cool. Fun facts. You could potentially still see his face. So,
Potentially. Potentially. So, the surviving three younger children, the twins and Ptolemy Philadelphus, were spared, mainly because they were too young to pose a political threat and were useful as living props for Octavian's upcoming victory parade. In 29 BCE, they transported them to Rome. They didn't arrive as guests, they arrived as the spoils of the East. During Octavian's grand triumph, the Roman crowds witnessed a grotesque spectacle. Because Cleopatra had cheated him by dying, he had to get creative to satisfy the Roman mob's desire for a spectacle. He commissioned a large wax effigy of Cleopatra, depicting her lying on the couch with the asp clinging to her arm.
which
Behind.
this is really interesting. I don't know if we really talked about when Caesar died, but there's a podcast I listen to. I love it. It's honestly what inspired me to do this, kind of in this style. But it's Ancient History Fangirl, and they go into this a lot because they cover Julius Caesar's life, in really good detail, including his assassination, death, and funeral. And I don't know if we brought it up, but they did these it was a Roman thing apparently. And again, when we go into mourning practices as a Patreon, because I feel like we're officially making that now.
We have to now.
Yeah, we have to now. They would do these like really hyper realistic wax masks. So I'm thinking like Madame Trousseau style, and effigies and shit, right? Like they had 5 Caesars in this like death funeral parade thing. For each of his triumphs, and which is interesting. But yeah, so like this is just this callback to that. Like, so when we say a wax effigy, don't think of like some crude thing. It would have been incredibly lifelike.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it just kind of like imagine and how haunting that would be. And being those kids, behind that.
Yeah. So behind it were walking the 3 children. They were dressed in heavy, stiff robes of Persian and Egyptian royalty.
And just to point this out, they were like 6 years old.
They were babies.
Imagine your mom just died. You're going through all this crap that we're about to describe, and you're behind this statue that looks just like her, and you can't cry or anything.
No.
And the one is 2. The one is 2.
Yeah. They were also weighed down by gold chains, symbols of their parents' excess. And they struggled to keep pace with the soldiers because of it. The Roman mob, usually bloodthirsty, was famously moved to tears by the sight of the orphans. And Octavian, sensing the mood, spared their lives to avoid appearing as a child killer, much like what had happened with Arsinoe all those years ago. After the parade, the children were handed over to, you guessed it, Octavia.
That poor bitch. Oh my God. So heartbreaking, like an interesting parallel, right? It's like normally he's really good at reading the books. It's interesting that he thought this was going to go better. I don't know. But yeah, they were slated to be executed.
Yeah. Oh, guaranteed.
He was going to kill him. No, that's like dead ass. Like what was going to happen? He officially was that he was going to kill them. These babies, literally one of them was an actual baby, like an actual like baby. And he was surprised, I guess, that because he's a sociopath, that the crowd wasn't all there for it.
Yep.
Like watching toddlers crying,
watching babies die. They don't want to do that.
Well, like and that's saying something with the Romans, but like they're watching these 6-year-olds with these heavy, heavy, heavy chains dragging, being like yanked on, crying, looking up at the picture of their mom, and people are like, "Oh Jesus!" You
Yeah.
know? I'm glad that there was still some human decency in this goddamn timeline, because, oh my god.
I mean, decency, no. Uh, Political
And also, I'm
shifting,
glad they had,
yes.
as much as I would much rather them be with their mom, I'm glad
Mhm.
they at least had Octavia,
Yeah.
because it seems like she looked out for these kids while she could.
Honestly, we really need to go into Octavia eventually.
Hmm.
I need to know her story. I have
I
to
do
know it.
too. Yeah. Um. So you may have heard me just say, at least while they were living with her, right?
Hmm.
So let's talk about that. So the first two kids, right, are Alexander Helios and Ptolemy, little baby Ptolemy, right? They were raised in Octavia's household on the Palatine Hill. There they were taught Latin and Roman customs, effectively Egyptianized, right? Which, I mean, how much can a 2-year-old be? But whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but here's the thing. That's about it. That's about all we know for sure. Right there.
Hmm.
A sentence. So the fate of Alexander Helios is unknown after this. Um, so these next few people, we're talking about 200 years, 300 years after the fact, right?
Hmm.
So Plutarch, Cassius Dio, and Suetonius state that Octavian had killed him. Um, so there's that. And the only further mention of Alexander Helios and Ptolemy comes from Cassius Dio, who states that when their sister, Cleopatra II, Selene II, married King Juba II in 25 BCE, Octavian, by them named Augustus, had spared the lives of Alexander Helios and Ptolemy as a favor of the couple. After Helios arrives in Rome, though, he disappears from historical records. Historians look at the silence after 20 BC with suspicion. While the childhood illness was common, the simultaneous disappearance of two male heirs of the Egyptian Empire was remarkably convenient for Augustus, because we have to remember that, right?
Hmm.
They're pharaoh.
They are. They have legitimate claim.
Yeah, better to make those disappear. The
Agreed.
girl, yeah, she's just a girl because Romans. I mean, they forgot Cleopatra was just a girl too, but whatever. But if you
True.
marry her off, she's neutralized,
Yep.
because the Egyptians wouldn't accept her now because she's married to another king.
Hmm.
But whether they died of some kind of Roman fever or were retired to prevent them from becoming figureheads for a rebellion remains one of history's quietest tragedies.
So only the girl, Cleopatra Selene II, managed to navigate the labyrinth of Roman power. She grew up in the heart of the palace, watching her uncle, Augustus, transform the world. In 25 BCE, Augustus used her as a geopolitical tool. He married her to Juba II, a captive prince of Namibia, who had become a Romanized scholar. Augustus sent them to rule Mauritania, modern Morocco and Algeria, as a client kingdom. It was here that Selene performed a quiet act of rebellion. She turned her new capital, Caesarea, into a new Alexandria. She built libraries, invited Greek scholars, and minted coins featuring her own face on one side and her mother's symbols, the crocodile and the ibis, on the other. For 20 years, she ruled as a powerful, respected queen, ensuring that the blood of Mark Antony and Cleopatra didn't just survive, but governed. Selene's son, named Ptolemy to honor his grandfather, eventually inherited the throne. However, the Ptolemaic curse of attracting the envy of Rome caught up to him. In 40 AD, his cousin, the emperor Caligula, invited him to Rome. Seeing Ptolemy enter the arena wearing a purple cloak more magnificent than his own, the jealous Caligula had him executed. With that final act of petty Roman spite, the line of Mark Antony and Cleopatra and the entire Ptolemaic dynasty was finally and permanently extinguished.
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like out of all of them, I mean, we didn't really touch the Antonias. Like, there were a lot of Antonias.
Yeah.
But it was more about like all the people that were kids that actually were present in Egypt when it all fell, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like she was the only one to make it.
True. And even
Um,
her line didn't last long.
because Caligula.
Fucking Caligula.
That's a story. But perhaps the most significant historical aftermath was the legal status of Egypt itself. This is why maybe those two kids couldn't be around.
Mm-hmm.
Octavian did not turn Egypt into a standard Roman province. Because remember, that was a whole problem. That's why they wouldn't take it over for so long. It was too rich. Anyone who was a governor there could potentially become a tyrant. And we don't want that as a republic.
Yeah.
But as an empire, he could declare it as personal property because we don't worry about kings no more. But also don't want anyone else getting a hold of it to overthrow said empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he passed a law forbidding any Roman senator from entering Egypt without his express permission. And this goes a really long time, by the way, like Marcus Aurelius long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like hundreds of years in the future. So that's how important this was and how long of an impact that was. He feared that the province was so wealthy and its grain supply so vital. I mean, it fed the city of Rome after all, that a rival could easily use it as a base for a new civil war. And I would say he was not wrong in thinking that.
Correct.
Instead, he appointed a prefect from the equestrian class, which was lower than a senator's, right? They're pretty much commoners, to manage it, ensuring that the governor would never have the social standing to challenge him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, you just kind of put a guy who's pretty much a peasant in charge because he's loyal to you. And even if he wanted to, he can't do nothing.
Yep.
So Octavian, now taking the name Augustus, began a massive damnatio memoriae, or the damnation of memory, an erasure of names. Which is ironic because whenever they do this, it's like we strike their name from the record so no one will ever speak of them again. And yet here we are. It's almost like it makes them more famous. So,
Mm-hmm.
but Antony's names Antony's statues were torn down. His name was removed from the Fausti, the official calendar / records. And his birthday was declared a quote evil day. And his family was forbidden from ever naming another son Marcus. Yeah.
That's low.
Yeah. But honestly, maybe it's good because damn, that was like their favorite name.
It really was.
It's like it forced them to pick a different one. Like, I don't know. Maybe he was doing them a favor with that. But no, for real. I know there's a lot of like these are almost like titles that you give your family. And
Yeah.
so it's like imagine you were a John and like every guy in your family's been named John. And then one day you're told you can't name your kid John anymore.
It's
You're
taking
losing a
away a
piece of your
tradition. It's a heritage thing.
and right, and you're cutting them off from their ancestors. You're cutting
Yeah,
them off. It just it's petty,
it is.
you know. But then also from his point, it's like no one can rise up as a Mark Antony, a
Yes.
Marcus Antonius, to challenge him, right? Because names
You
are
see,
powerful.
now I have to adopt a son and name him Marcus Antonius.
Don't do that to your poor kid.
I will do
Only if you have
so.
a daughter named Antonia, and just Antonia,
Potentially.
like name her, and just name her Antonia, like 8, like, or Antonia, whatever. Antonia, I
No.
lost count. Like, Antonia, I lost count.
Antonia Infinitus.
Yes, that sounds so impressive. So, but they wouldn't care about their girls that much.
Oh God.
So while he allowed the lovers to be buried together, he ensured that the history written about them painted Antony as a drunkard who lost his Roman quote unquote manhood to a foreign sorceress. This official version of history is the one that survived for 2,000 years into modern times. So the golden age of the Ptolemies didn't end with the closing of a tomb. It ended with a series of quiet, clinical erasures. For the children of Cleopatra, the deaths of their parents was the start of a terrifying transition from royalty to being political liabilities. And in the end, Octavian won the war, the empire, and even the history books. But he could never quite extinguish the ghost of the couple he had defeated. By burying together, he intended to close a chapter on a civil war, but instead, he created a shrine that would haunt the Roman imagination for centuries.
The legacy of Antony and Cleopatra survives as a profound tension between propaganda and poetry. To the Roman state, they were a cautionary tale of oriental excess, the story of a great Roman general who lost his virtus, manly virtue, to a foreign
Manly!
sorceress, manly.
Manly!
Augustus spent decades funding poets like Virgil and Horace to paint Antony as a tragic drunk and Cleopatra as a monstrous female. And this is why you have heard us say the entire time there is so much propaganda in this. And there are
Mm-hmm.
aspects of the story that we just do not believe.
Yeah, like he spent money. And again, tell us to stop when this sounds familiar. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, don't look at the Epstein.
Yeah.
Spending a lot of money and resources to get things redacted and changed. And
Yeah.
kids go mysteriously missing. Mm,
Yet the sheer
but
scale of their defiance broke through the cracks of the Roman narrative. They became the ultimate symbols of sovereignty and a shared fate. Cleopatra was not just a lover. She was the last head of state to look Rome in the eye and say, no. Her death was her final act of political agency, ensuring that she would never be led through the streets of Rome like a common criminal.
historians often point out if they had just been sensible, they would have surrendered. Cleopatra could have betrayed Antony to save her children. Antony could have abandoned Cleopatra to reclaim his Roman dignity. Yet they did neither. In an age of cold transactional power, their refusal to survive without one another transformed them from failed politicians into the archetype of tragic lovers. I mean, I feel like, as you pointed out, it gives Romeo and Juliet vibes, does it not?
It very much does.
And like right down to the tomb and everything. And the, oh, I thought you killed yourself. You know, I mean, see, to be fair, Shakespeare wrote Cleopatra as a play, and of course, Romeo and Juliet, which is supposed to be fictional. So,
Mm-hmm.
right. Um, so their legacy lived on most vibrantly through their daughter, Cleopatra Selene. In those mountains in North Africa, we have seen she had built a kingdom that was a mirror image of Alexandria that her parents lost. She, of course, had named her son Ptolemy in an attempt to ensure that the name of the Greek pharaohs was spoken in royal halls for at least one more century. She kept her mother's face on coins, a quiet, metallic rebellion against Augustus's attempts to erase her family from history.
Today, we do not remember the administrative brilliance of Augustus with the same fervor that we remember the final hours in the Alexandrian mausoleum. We are drawn to them because they represent the ultimate human gamble. the sacrifice of a world for a person. They remain the whore queen and the ruined gambler to the critics. But to the world, they are the two figures who turned the end of an era into an immortal legend. Octavian conquered the earth, but Antony and Cleopatra conquered the human heart, proving that even in defeat, there is a kind of victory in choosing how you fall. And with that, that brings season 1 of the Time Travelers Club to a close. Raise a glass.
Yeah, that you're gonna need it after that one.
Oh, I'm gonna need a couple shots.
Yeah, this was a heavy one. But we will have one more episode after this as sort of a wrap up, where we discuss the season, answer questions, and get excited about what's coming up next for the club. So we are so excited to share all of this with you guys.
If you like what you heard today, please give us a positive review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on. It goes a long way for us to appease the algorithm gods and to get this suggested to others just like you. The more that we can connect to our fellow history nerds, the more that we can build up a community and keep the show going.
Also, as you've heard multiple times, we have a Patreon where you can hang. Yeah. Where you can hang, like, I mean, to give an idea of like what's on there. I know this is not the typical close we do, but just so you know, we've done Atlantis, Fayum mummies. We've done we're doing a kind of a mini series right now on like the triple goddess, like, and like trying to give proper context to all of that. So the first one we have on there is on Hecate, and we have so many more ideas that we're so excited to talk about. But they are usually topics that don't fit into the main arcs of the podcast. But we do just generally end up being batshit and dumpster fires, like you've seen today, all for the price of a latte per month. Research and books cost a lot of money, guys, and it takes a lot of time to create this show. So anything you provide would be a huge help.
We can't wait to see you again next week, next season. And as
Next
always,
season.
next season, I'm going to cry now. I already did throughout this last one. I'm not going to lie. Oh,
I know, me too. It was a rough ride.
it was a rough ride. I'm going to say that again. We can't wait to see you again next season. And as always, thanks for listening.
Bye for now.